News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet?
What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Hello, good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me in the next hour, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Love that picture. Also former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larzer. In a few moments' time, we'll be going head-to-head in a clash of minds with the former MP Stephen Pound and also the former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib, who will both be going head-to-head. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Sophia.
Good afternoon, it's 3 o'clock. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Israel's Prime Minister has told troops the war against Hamas is do or die for his country. Benjamin Netanyahu's comments come as the military prepares to launch another ground offensive against Gaza overnight with airstrikes. The Palestinian Health Ministry says 266 people, including 117 children, have been killed in the past 24 hours. Israel has now issued a warning to residents in the north of the Strip, telling them to head south, or they may be identified as sympathisers of terrorist organisation. IDF spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner says forces are only targeting Hamas.
We know how extensive their tunnel mechanisms is and how they are operating and using them. So we're confident we have good intelligence, but the realm of warfare is it's not the known knowns, it's the unknown knowns. And so we know that we have a brutal enemy. We don't know exactly what they're doing. We have a good grasp of their operational capabilities, and we need to confront that and remove that as if it was a tumor.
Former head of the Palestinian diplomatic mission to the UK, Manuel Hassassian, says he still believes in a two-state solution.
Don't try to put us, all in a frame that we are terrorists as Palestinians. There is a difference between the Palestinian people who want peace and security, and there is a difference between the Palestinian Authority, which is the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, who believe in a two-state solution, who have condemned violence all along. The question is, can Israel stop state terrorism on equal basis? That's a question.
Security and humanitarian sources say a second convoy of aid has entered Gaza. Yesterday, 20 trucks carrying supplies were allowed into the Strip after the Rafah crossing on the border with Egypt was opened for the first time in 2 weeks. The UN World Food Programme is describing the humanitarian situation in Gaza as catastrophic. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick says diplomacy is key in helping civilians.
What we should be doing is using the assets of the UK, which is our relationships with countries like Egypt and Israel, and our development aid to support as many vulnerable people as possible in Gaza, rather than creating small schemes to privilege a small number of people. The priority is to get the British nationals out and humanitarian aid in a way which means it is not diverted and abused by the terrorist organisation Hamas.
Violence in the region is spreading, with Israel launching airstrikes in the occupied West Bank. A compound beneath a mosque in the Yenin refugee camp was hit. The Israeli military claims it was being used by militants to organise attacks. Palestinian medics say 2 people were killed and several others injured. A search and rescue operation is underway off the Kent coast following reports a man on a passenger ship fell overboard. German cruise company Ada has confirmed its crew member of Ada Perla. The alarm was raised just before 9 o'clock this morning. Lifeboats supported by a helicopter are now scouring an area near Ramsgate. 2 new danger-to-life weather warnings have been issued in England in the wake of Storm Babette. Severe flood warnings are in place around the River Idle near Retford in Nottinghamshire as water levels continue to rise. The number of people who've died during the storm has risen to 4 after police found the body of a woman in her 80s in Chesterfield. Floods are still affecting parts of the UK, including Yorkshire, Scotland, East Anglia and the East Midlands. And Manchester United has opened a book of condolences at Old Trafford following the death of Sir Bobby Charlton. He was a key member of England's World Cup winning team in 1966. Flowers and football shirts have also been laid outside Manchester United Stadium. The club says he will always be remembered as a giant of the game. Former England manager Sam Allardyce has paid tribute to his kindness.
He was a great ambassador for Manchester United and a great ambassador for football and England, and such a kind person. I think that's what everybody as tribute is explaining to what a great guy he was, what a contribution he made to football for England and for Manchester United. And of course, as a youngster, I watched him in the World Cup final on my black and white TV at the time all those years ago. But it was a pleasure to know him. Every time I went to Old Trafford, he'd stop and have a chat with you.
This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now, let's return to Nana.
Thank you, Sophia. 6 minutes after 3 o'clock, this is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, before we get stuck into our debates over the next hour, let me introduce you again to my head-to-headers, the former Labour MP Stephen Pound and also the former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib. Now, here's what's coming up. Israel's military have vowed to continue airstrikes on Gaza and warns residents in the north of the territory to move south. I'll be speaking to security editor Mark White. He's there live in Tel Aviv. He'll bring you the latest. More trouble for the Metropolitan Police, who have come under fire again for allowing chants of jihad at a pro-Palestine march yesterday in London. Should the Met Police have intervened? Also, is Rishi Sunak's premiership in crisis? Well, we know it is, but According to reports, up to 25 MPs are set to hand in a vote of no confidence against the Prime Minister following a double by-election defeat on Thursday. So should the Tories cut their losses and ditch Sunak? Or should they cut their losses and keep Sunak? I'm not sure whether there'll be a difference. And also, this is a big one, especially if you're a landlord, no-fault evictions. Should they be banned? Rishi Sunak could be pushing ahead with a policy to ban no-fault evictions, which could see a lot of landlords moved out of the housing market. Many have described this as an anti-landlord bill, but do you agree? And finally, who do you think is more likely to cut taxes between the Tories and the Labour Party? A new poll has found that Sir Keir Starmer's party is to be the champion of lower taxes, but sees him as a flip-flopper on many policies, and so he might or he might not. That's coming up in the next hour. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. But first, Israel's military have sent an urgent warning to Palestinians to move south of the Gaza Strip or risk being seen as terrorist sympathisers. Now, this comes as Israeli media reports that Hamas terrorists have been captured in Israel near the border with Gaza after being in hiding since the attacks on the 7th of October. So I'm going to cross live now to Tel Aviv and speak to our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, so talk to me about what's been going on. Can you give me an update?
Yes, it's been a very busy day here in Israel in terms of the ongoing conflict. We have seen that escalation as promised by the Israeli Defense Force in terms of the strikes on northern Gaza to take out what they say are Hamas targets ahead of this expected land invasion. And that has brought about a response, as we expected, with a significant uptick, I think, in rocket fire that has come out of Gaza into Israel throughout today, certainly attacking targets in southern Israel and central Israel, including just south of the Tel Aviv here, just on the southern outskirts of this city this morning, with a barrage of rockets being intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome defence system. And the Israeli Defence Force have just given an update actually on the figures for the number of rockets that have come over since the terrorist attacks of October the 7th. They say that 7,625 rockets have been launched from Gaza since that day, just over 2 weeks ago. And it's continuing as I speak to you. Another alert just southeast of Gaza this time, with a barrage of rockets coming over and being intercepted again by the Iron Dome system. Away from that, Nana, taking you up to northern Israel, the border with Lebanon. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been visiting Israeli troops up there. He has issued a very stark warning to the terror group Hezbollah, warning them not to open up a new front in this conflict. There has, of course, been missile fire, sporadic fire coming across that border, across that Lebanon border in recent days, with the Israeli forces returning fire, taking out, they say, Hezbollah targets. But Benjamin Netanyahu saying that there would be a reciprocal attack of unimaginable magnitude should Hezbollah decide to enter this conflict in any meaningful way in the days ahead. On a more positive note, we have seen some more trucks coming across the Gaza-Egyptian border, the Rafah crossing there. 20 yesterday. So far today we're aware of 17 trucks that have crossed. It's a very small number in comparison to the hundreds of trucks that would normally come into Gaza when we are not in this particular conflict phase. It's badly needed, but what we're not getting at the moment are fuel trucks coming over. The Israelis have had no guarantees that the fuel supplies that come into Gaza would not then be taken by Hamas, of course, which controls the Gaza Strip. In fact, the concern is that anyway a lot of the aid supplies that are coming over will be commandeered by Hamas.
Oh, goodness. I mean, this is just, it's terrifying, really. Listen, Mark, we'll keep up to date with you throughout the show. Thank you so much for that. That is Mark White. He's there in Tel Aviv. We can now speak to David Hatcham. Now, he's a former IDF colonel and advisor to Ministers of the Defence for Arab Affairs. Good afternoon, David. Thank you so much for joining me. Now, a lot of people probably may not know the history, the historical context of it. I presume because you've been working within this area for decades that you'll know with regard to the start of it all with the withdrawal in 2005 and all the numerous sort of conflicts ever since. Talk to me about what it was like and some of the things that have happened throughout that conflict.
Yes, it's hard to do it in a very short way, because we are speaking about, dozens of years to the past. Listen, first of all, I would like to tell you that during my military service, I served in the Gaza Strip for almost 8 years. This was like 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, during the first Palestinian uprising, which is called in Arabic Intifada. I was there in the Gaza Strip. I was located in the main city of Gaza, the city of Gaza, and I was the advisor for Palestinian and Arab affairs to the commanders of the Southern Command and the and Kogat, the civilian administration commander inside Gaza. I must tell you in this regard that we have passed many, many events in the past which brought us to the present situation today of this, last wave of terrorism from the Gaza Strip against the Israeli civilians. I can tell you that I think that one of the main junction in this regard, I don't want to go back, many, many years to the past, but I'll tell you frankly, I think June 2007, this was, I would say, the changing point in this regard, as regard to the Israeli, the Israeli deployment in the Gaza Strip. In June 2007, Hamas took an overall control of the Gaza Strip, and as a matter of fact, kicked out, expelled all the people of the Palestinian Authority, which they had until today is Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, and Hamas took overall control in Gaza. This was I would say, the changing, point in this regard. And from that period of time until today, Hamas is in a full control of the Gaza Strip area. And from June 2007, there were 3 major, military operations of the IDF, of the Israeli Defense Forces, inside Gaza, because you have to understand the meaning of Hamas. Hamas, by the way, is the abbreviations of Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, the Islamic resistance movement. And listen carefully to the abbreviations of Hamas. You cannot find the word Palestine or Palestinian in the word, because the ambition of Hamas is not only to liberate, in quotations, Palestine, and to be responsible for Palestine, including, the West Bank or Judea and Samaria, but at the same time, the looking of Hamas is to all over the Arab lands, from ocean to ocean, from the Indian Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean, and to rebuild the Islamic empire as it was after the time of the Prophet Muhammad and the first 4 caliphs in the time of the Umayyad Empire and Abbasi Empire, on the ruins of the state of Israel. You have to know this. And as a matter of fact, Hamas is like an anti-Semitic, movement against Israel, against the Jews, calling to kill, to exterminate, to slaughter the Jews. This is something that you have to take into consideration when I'm speaking about Hamas ideology.
So some people...
I can elaborate more. Sorry, yes.
But some people might argue that, can you separate Hamas as a terrorist organisation with the governing body, Hamas, of those Palestinian areas? Because some people, are they separate entities or are they all one?
Listen, we are speaking about one organization, one movement that has two different, I would say, arms or different departments. There is the ideological, political one, headed today by Ismail Haniyeh. I know him personally, Ismail Haniyeh. And there is the operational wing of Hamas, headed by Mohammed Deif. This is the name of the leader of Hamas. And another one that has to be mentioned is somebody from Khan Yunis. We have all the names, of Khalid Mash'al, Ismail Haniyeh. These are from the political wing, and the guys from the operational one, Mohammed Deif and Marwan Isa, and all the others. And as a matter of fact, they are operating in two, different, I would say, sections, but at the same time, we are speaking about one organization, political, operational, but in one organization. And now I would like to tell you in this respect that, Hamas is inciting all the time against Israel. In the ideology of Hamas, you cannot find the word Israel. There is no Israel. We are from Hamas side, Al-Kiyan al-Yahudi, the Jewish entity, or Al-Kiyan al-Sayuni, the Zionist entity. They are calling explicitly, very directly to the extermination of the Jewish state. They are speaking it, loudly. No, there is no, question as regards to the aspiration and the ideology of Hamas vis-a-vis the state of Israel. This is something that yes, please.
So is it the fact that they are not after a two-state solution at all, and that they just simply want a one-state? So is a two-state solution possible then with that ideology?
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm happy that you are asking me this question. There is no whatsoever any common ground for any negotiations, for any settlement between Israel and Hamas. Hamas is totally a terroristic organization, as I've told you before, calling for the extermination, for the annihilation of the Jewish state, of the Israeli state. And you speak with me, I know in person all the leaders of Hamas. No common ground. Listen, they are against any negotiations. They are against any, I would say, accepting the very existence of Israel as a Jewish state. They are against any, all the accords that were signed between Israel and the PLO during the Oslo process. They are totally against. They are calling explicitly, publicly, with no hesitation, to the extermination of Israel as a Jewish state and the establishment of Palestinian Islamic State as the first phase, and later on revival of the Islamic Empire, the Islamic Caliphate, as it was after the time of the Prophet Muhammad. This is very marked in a short and clear way. No common ground. Listen, I know, even the priest, the Islamic priest that was behind the establishment of Hamas, his name is Sheikh Ahmed Yassin. He established Hamas 5 days after the beginning, the eruption of the First Intifada. The First Intifada was erupted at December 9th, 1987. 5 days later, 14th of December 1987, Hamas was established. And from the beginning, like a year after the establishment of Hamas, they began with terrorist or terror, operations against the state of Israel, kidnapping soldiers, kidnapping, and killing them. And they are doing it in the most brutal way. I must tell you, if I can add one thing more,
if you would go for it.
I must tell you that what we have seen 2 weeks ago, in Shabbat, in Saturday, inside the area very close, very adjacent, neighboring the Gaza Strip, was like a barbaric way of killing people, raping, etc., etc. People in Israel were a little bit surprised. I was not surprised of what I've seen. I know the nature, the barbaric nature of Hamas, and they are educating the young kids from 3 years old, 4 years old, to hate the Jews, to kill the Jews, to kill as many Jews as they can. And this is something that for many in Israel were surprised. They say, to this degree, They are anti-Israel, anti-Jews, anti-Semitic, etc., etc. And I was not surprised at all because I know the nature, I know the ideology, I know the positions. And this is something that we have to take, of course, into serious consideration.
David, thank you very much for talking to me. We could talk to you for ages, and we'll have to get you on and talk again. Thank you so much. That's David Hatcham. Right, well, let's have a quick chat to our political correspondent, Olivia Utley, who reported on the pro-Palestinian protest yesterday and is at Trafalgar Square ahead of the Israel Solidarity protest. Now, Olivia, has the protest started?
No, we're expecting to start in 45 minutes or so, but as you can probably see behind me, there is a build-up of people now. I've been chatting to people here who are grateful to us for covering this rally. It's getting a lot less attention than the Palestinian march yesterday. I've also been noticing, talking to people, just how many people here are actually Jewish. Yesterday, the marchers were all races, all creeds, all different demographics, all standing behind Palestine. But interestingly, quite a lot of the Jews I've spoken to today say that they feel it's only the Jewish community who is now standing up for Jews in the UK and in Gaza and Israel as well, which is a pretty sad state of affairs. They are campaigning here for Hamas to let go the 203 hostages who have been taken in Gaza and Israel, some of whom are babies, older people. There's a 90-year-old among them. 2 have been released, 2 American Israeli hostages have been released, but that's still 200 waiting in who knows what conditions.
Listen, Olivia, we will catch up with you throughout the show. Thank you so much. That's Olivia Utley. She's there at the pro-Israeli protests. Thank you so much. Right, this is GB News, 24 minutes after 3 o'clock is fast approaching. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, faced with the Tory rebellion over the ban on no-fault evictions. Are the government right to be pursuing this policy? But up next, there are rumours that his Chancellor could throw in the towel before the next election. So should the Tories get rid of Rishi? We'll be debating that with Stephen and Ben next.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie, second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm
not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good afternoon. Coming up to 28 minutes after 3 o'clock. Now, earlier I spoke to David Hatcham. He's a former IDF colonel and advisor to Ministers of Defence for Arab Affairs on whether Hamas, the state, and Hamas, the terrorist group, are two separate entities. Let's get the thoughts of Ben Habib, also Stephen Pound. They're live now with me. I'm going to start with you, actually, Stephen Pound. I did ask, because I wanted to know, because people often say Hamas, the organisation, and Hamas, the terrorists, they're not the same thing, and he sort of was kind of saying they're one and the same.
Well, absolutely precisely. And when we had the statements from the Gaza Health Authority, well, the Gaza Health Authority is Hamas. But I think that nobody can really deny that anymore. What depresses me about this more than anything else is in life it's easier sometimes to find a scapegoat than it is to find a solution. And what's happening is, as long as people concentrate on their hatred of Israel, the hatred of the Jews, they're actually ignoring the real issues, the potential for Gaza, the money that could come in from the other Arab states. Imagine a tiny fraction of the oil wealth, if that flowed into Gaza, there would be no shortages of electricity or gas or water. And yet, instead of doing something for their people, they're concentrating on this hatred, and that depresses the hell out of me.
Ben?
Well, I completely agree with Stephen. Hamas is an outwardly declared terrorist organisation, and we saw the manifestation of their terrorism on the 7th of October. They're still holding 200 hostages. And I think what's very telling is that there are 23 Arab countries, none of which are rushing to aid Hamas. They all understand that Hamas is a bad organisation. And remember, Hamas, even with all their promotion, ostensible promotion of Islam, and I think a lot of Muslims would disagree with the way that Hamas is going about making its case, obviously, but even with all their ostensible promotion of Islam, Hamas is a Sunni organisation, and it is funded by a Shia organisation, Iran. Iran is Hamas's paymaster. Hamas are Iran's useful idiots. They are exposing the Palestinian people to extreme hostile responses by their own actions and taking money from Iran. That is almost verboten in the Sunni theology of Islam. You can't do that. You can't be taking pay from Shias. And so Hamas is a deeply ideologically flawed entity. It is terroristic, it is flawed, it doesn't care about the people of Palestine, it is stopping them from moving to the south of Gaza, it is exposing them willfully to attacks in the north, it has got 200 hostages. If it wanted any sympathy with its 23 Arab countries and the rest of the world, it would release those hostages. You don't need hostages if you're in a war.
Well, but even David there, who has spent decades with the IDF, has said that the brutality that was given on the 7th of October, even he and the Israelis were horrified by it, despite having been in a sort of conflict this for a long time. They were surprised by that level of brutality.
No, the bar of horror, it seems to be lowered every time. But look, the interesting thing is about why did Iran and Hamas act now? And I think the reality is, if you actually have a look at the great peace movements in that, we got Oslo, Camp David, but the Abrahamic Accords, recently, you've got Saudi Arabia, Morocco, many other countries who are actually talking about normalising relations with Israel. That is anathema to Hamas and to Iran.
And that's why it's kicked off.
Exactly.
Because of normalisation of relations with particularly Saudi.
We can't keep agreeing.
No, well, we can find... We'll disagree on the next one.
They agree. We have to move on. This is not what this is about. It's called head-to-head. This is GB News. Coming up to 32 minutes after 3 o'clock, I'm Nana Akua. Coming up, could Labour be the party to give us the tax cuts that most Brits are calling out for? We'll get stuck into debating that. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Sophia.
It's 3:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Israel's Prime Minister has told troops the war against Hamas is do or die for his country. Benjamin Netanyahu's comments come as the military prepares to launch another offensive in Gaza after 2 mosques were destroyed in overnight airstrikes. Israel has issued an urgent warning to residents in the north of the Strip, telling them to head south, or they may be identified as sympathisers of a terrorist organisation. Meanwhile, witnesses are saying they heard a blast and the sound of it was allowed to enter Gaza. Yesterday, 20 trucks delivered supplies to the Strip after the border with Egypt was opened for the first time in 2 weeks. The UN World Food Programme is describing the humanitarian situation in Gaza as catastrophic. A search and rescue operation is underway off the Kent coast following reports a man on a passenger ship fell overboard. German cruise company Ada has confirmed it's a crew member of the Ada Perla. The alarm was raised just before 9 o'clock this morning. Lifeboats, supported by a helicopter, are now scouring the area near Ramsgate. 2 new danger to life weather warnings have been issued in England in the wake of Storm Babette. Severe flood warnings are in place around the River Idle near Retford in Nottinghamshire, which is expected to reach record levels. The number of people who've died during the storm has risen to 4 after police found the body of a woman in her 80s in Chesterfield. You can get more on all those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Nana.
Thank you, Sophia. Coming up, should the Metropolitan Police have allowed calls for jihad at the pro-Palestine protest yesterday? I'll be debating that with Stephen Pound and Ben Habib next.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Can you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
That is 7 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, it's time to go head-to-head on this story. The Metropolitan Police are in hot water for failing to act after protesters called for jihad at a pro-Palestinian demonstration. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick condemned the chant, saying it incited terrorist violence. And in a comment posted on Twitter, the Met said, the word jihad has a number of meanings, but we know the public will most commonly associate it with terrorism. We have specialist counter-terrorism officers here who have particular knowledge in this area. They have not identified any offences arising from the specific clip. But should the Metropolitan Police have allowed the calls for jihad? Right, let me welcome back my head-to-head as former Labour MP Stephen Pound and also the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Ben Habib. Ben Habib.
Well, in the interest of full exposition of the word jihad, before we just discuss this particular point, I want to say jihad in Islam means a meritorious struggle in the pursuit of good. It's not even in the opposition of evil. So I just want to get that out there. But of course, the lesser form of jihad is an outwardly expression of that struggle rather than the inward one, which is a higher form of jihad. But the lesser form can and has been expressed in warfare. And Islam doesn't prohibit warfare. Islam is prepared as a religion to go to war. And that, the way that the word jihad, I'm sure, was being used yesterday was an incitement to violence. And it was very clear from what was going on in those protests, including, large ISIS flags being swung from left to right and, messages of death to the infidel being put out, that the Met simply were not doing their job. They watched protesters climb scaffolding, held their flags for them, and then gave them their flags back. It's just so embarrassing. And the argument that they might make is they didn't want to make matters worse. But that is effectively law enforcement taking the knee to the breaking of the law. That was an incitement to violence yesterday, and it has to be cracked down on.
And I just will come back to your definition with regard to jihad, because I know it does have other meanings, but pretty much since the start of the 20th century, the word actually has got that negative connotation, and that's because people like the Mujahideen, the Taliban, Northern Alliance, they all use jihad as a way of, inciting warfare.
Well, in some ways, they use it as a simile to the word crusade. I mean, they do use it. But look, I have to say, looking at what... I have a simple rule in life about public order. If the French do it one way, I'd want to do it the other way. And it's perfectly... The French decided to ban all these marches, all these demonstrations, and what happened? Doubled the number of people on the street. It created people who would then say... and filled the prisons. We don't have enough room in the prisons at the present time. The police did actually lift 11 people yesterday. They did actually arrest them under the Public Order Act. I think the police are actually being proportionate in this particular thing. I find it horrifically offensive.
How can you say that? Let's just put it under the backdrop of what has happened and what is happening. So we've had this awful situation with Hamas, who have murdered over 1,400 people in Israel. Now we have a full-on war, and people are coming out in the streets to call for jihad and also singing the chant from the river to the sea, I might add, which again is another incitement to kill and death to Jews. So come on.
Nana, are you saying that we then lift 100,000 people and arrest 100,000 people? Are you saying that?
I'm not saying we arrest them. I'm saying that we need...
But what do we do?
Well, I think there needs to be something done, but I think
I think we should treat them with withering contempt and say you're a bunch of student politicians elections, playing at politics, playing with fire, playing with something you know nothing about. You know absolutely nothing about the reality of Hamas. How dare you go on the streets with your pseudo-Arabic costume on and these socialist worker banners and placards, pretending that you speak for the Palestinians. You do not speak for the Palestinians. Treat them with absolute ignoral, as Ernie Bevan used to say. I'd have nothing to do with them. I'd just let them go away and play their stupid puerile games.
I get it, and I feel that. But the problem is, as we know, that heightens the terror threat when we enable these kind of processes. And also, let's talk about the Jewish people in all of this as well.
I'm not Jewish. So
I mean, last week there was one Jewish person who was had to be protected by 50 officers as a load of people on a so-called peaceful Palestinian protest.
They threatened to behead him.
Yes, as they threatened to behead him. So that's my point. This isn't peaceful, is it?
No, Nana, I'm not Jewish. I cannot imagine what it must be like to be a visibly identifying Jewish person in London, let alone the United Kingdom today. I can't speak for that. What I can speak for is a Democrat, as a British citizen who's a Democrat, who hates to see people getting the oxygen of publicity for their stupidity and their nonsense, the ignorance that they're displaying on the streets. And I think if the police started going in and arresting people... I mean, look at the publicity that Greta Thunberg got last week in Park Lane.
But, Stephen, the police do pick and choose which demonstrations they're going to allow and which ones they're going to really hammer. So, for example, we saw the same behaviour with Black Lives Matter, which we now know to be, and I hope people recognise, to be an overtly political, anarchic organisation.
Oh, sorry, it's a cash machine.
I knew that from the start, to be honest with you. I don't know why
and the police literally took the knee to Black Lives Matter. And anyone who came up to make the completely legitimate and reasonable case that all lives matter, were treated with contempt by the police.
I was treated by contempt when I said all lives matter. I said you can't put up one life higher than another.
I think history will be kinder to you than it will be to those virtue signalling plods.
Well, we'll see. But let's move on. Great to have your company at home. Please get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.com. You can also tweet us at GBNews with your thoughts on the things we're discussing. Now, this is a story that I wanted to cover in the head-to-head debate. As growing turmoil within the Tory party, as reports suggest up to 25 MPs could send in letters of no confidence again for the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. So I'm asking, should the Conservatives ditch Rishi Sunak? Let's get my thoughts from my panel. My head-to-head is Stephen Pound.
Well,
again? Again?
I was going to say, you know what happens when you're in a car accident and you end up in hospital and they say to you, who is the Prime Minister? Well, how on earth could you say nowadays? You said, last week, next week? Look, it's ridiculous, and we don't know who these 25 people are. And if you're going to actually dump somebody, you've got to ask yourself the next question. If not him, who?
Yeah.
And the point is there's two strands. There are some people still, amazingly, who actually think Liz Truss could come back and save the nation.
Well, there are people who believe that Boris should still be there. And I actually believe that the beginning of the end was when they got rid of Boris. That was the chain of events.
Perhaps we can argue that at a different time. But look, the reality is divided parties don't win elections. And at the moment, the image that the Tories are giving is one of absolute, utter division and sort of mutual loathing. And the minute they start playing these games about putting in the 25 letters to the 1922 committee, all it does in the Labour Party, believe you me, we're sitting back rubbing our hands and say, we don't have to do anything. Just destroy yourselves.
You haven't had to do anything at all, to be fair.
Well, I mean, I agree that divided parties don't win elections. The Conservative Party is a deeply divided party. It's part of the problem that was created by David Cameron. In order to become the heir to Blair, he adopted this kind of one-nation Toryism, which doesn't mean the promotion of working-class interests as it used to traditionally mean. What that means, as far as the Conservative Party is concerned, trying to be all things to all people. And they've pivoted increasingly to the left to try and block Labour out from winning elections, and had become a very successful election-winning machine. But that road has ended because they've been utterly hopeless at governance. We've got a broken economy, broken public services, multiculturalism which isn't working. He can't stop the votes. They cannot govern. So Rishi Sunak has three choices, as far as I can see it. He either resigns and makes way for a genuinely centre-right Conservative leader who will champion the most commonsensical policies that will propel the United Kingdom forward.
Liz Truss, maybe?
Suella Braverman comes to mind, who will stop the boats, understand that it's the physical response to stop the boats, cut legal migration dramatically, cut taxes on the working and middle classes and businesses so we can actually flourish. And before someone looks at the screen and says, well, we haven't got the headroom to cut taxes, the OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, has repeatedly overestimated the government borrowing requirement. We would have been able to cut taxes under Liz Truss's scheme easily. Liz Truss's tax cuts were easily affordable by the government. Borrowing levels for the government have come in markedly below that. So cut taxes for the working middle classes and businesses, and for God's sake, bring Northern Ireland back into the United Kingdom.
Well, the big deal was the business
G7
rates. The business tax needs to be cut.
Business,
instantly.
absolutely. These 4 or 5 things that I've espoused, Rishi Sunak can either do them or he can face electoral obliteration.
Well, it's like the Renters Reform Bill, which is just an abhorrent idea. It's ridiculous.
Absolutely.
But haven't you noticed that Penny Mordaunt has now spoken to nearly 40 Conservative associations in the last 9 months? So she's on manoeuvres. There are people on manoeuvres. The question I would ask you is, if not Sunak, who? You say Braverman. I don't think Braverman has actually...
Well, they haven't got time. They haven't got time. They need to stick with what they have.
The next election, at the very latest, it's January, a year next January, at the very, very latest.
Rishi Sunak has got to stop thinking that he's going to solve the nation's problems through algebra up to the age of 18 and understand there's really fundamental issues he needs to get a grip of. He's still got a majority. Command your majority in Parliament and deliver what the people of this country want, not what the G7 or people in Davos want, what the people in this country want and need, and do it now.
Well, perhaps on this next, on that, the government is reportedly seeking to avoid a revolt over its Renters Reform Bill, as Tory rebels call the policy to ban no-fault evictions unconservative. The bill would give renters greater protections and stop landlords kicking tenants out without giving any explicit reason. But this proposal has angered many Tory MPs who view it as an anti-landlord policy. So should no-fault evictions be banned? What do you think, Benabid?
Absolutely. You should. The landlord should. The landlord should. I've got to get the right number of no's in the right order. You know, the right number of no's. Otherwise, you end up with a positive. No landlord should be prohibited from contractually taking control of his own property. It is a complete fallacy to think that if you prevent landlords from being able to eject tenants at the end of their tenancy, just because they haven't broken any of your provisions in the lease while they were tenants, that you're going to somehow improve the market. What you want is to encourage landlords to come into the market, own property and lease it. That way you get a much more vibrant leasing market. Any restrictions that make life difficult for landlords is going to restrict the supply of property, which is going to push rents up. It is short-term politics. It's not thought through. We had regulated rents after World War II. They were got rid of for a reason, because they don't work.
They don't work now. Especially with rising interest rates.
I think landlords actually need to look at their image. They have this image of being like Simon Legree figures, whipping the widows and the orphans out into the snowstorm. Look, I was a housing officer for years and years and years. An assured short-hold tenancy, which is the tenancy that most landlords use, means an assured short-hold tenancy. And you don't turn up at midnight and say you're out. You have to issue a notice of seeking possession. Right. You then have to go to court. I mean, I used to take these cases to court over and over again. As far as I'm concerned,
tenants have protection already.
Well, the protection is already existing. I think it's populist nonsense to actually suggest you can do this. We all know that rent controls don't work. Look at Berlin. It absolutely killed the rental market there. I think we need to actually realise that the rental market is very, very important, and not all landlords are satanic, blood-drinking so-and-so.
Well, the truth is that the majority of landlords, I think it's over 80% of them, are single-owning, so they have only one property, and they are just people who've maybe become accidental landlords.
Well, it's usually their mother's or their father's property that they've inherited.
Or they've met somebody and then they've decided to move in with their house, and then they have a house. So that is usually how most landlords are. And they're mostly normal people. There's a very small percentage of landlords who own hundreds of properties, and a lot of those ones, some of those are bad, yes.
Well, they used to, at Liverpool, they say, we all live in a Robbie Fowler house. I mean, Robbie Fowler...
And there are a lot of tenants who are bad.
Well, I've had the experience of some very bad tenants,
But just remember, a short-hold tenancy, that's what it is.
And it's a brilliant contract.
So what's the point? So what's the point? Because they're going to get rid of Section 21, where you can issue that no-fault eviction, which is what you should be able to do, because you might need the property, not just because you have to prove that you're selling it.
No, you can, at the moment you can determine a Section 21 by going to any Crown Court and just simply giving the notice of it. So that actually gives the tenant some time and some notice.
Exactly.
What's behind all this is the shortage of affordable housing. That's what I mean. I've been in Ealing this morning, actually looking at some 200 new affordable homes that we've built with the private sector in Ealing. We've got a massive shortage of housing, and the problem is when you get that, you start looking at the other end. You look at the landlord at the letting end. We should actually be looking at the supply, not just necessarily demand.
Absolutely critical. We've got to get supply.
Ben, we cannot carry on agreeing.
Well, OK,
sorry,
maybe I can't take it anymore. Maybe this one they'll disagree with. OK, so final one to them. Yeah. Could Labour give us the tax cuts the Tories won't? A new poll shows that Brits view Labour as more of a champion of lower taxes than the Conservatives, probably because they can't get any higher. The survey also found that almost 60% want the burden reduced. So what do you think? Will we pay less under Labour? Stephen Pound?
Probably not, because I'm not entirely sure where this comes from. I mean, there's nobody in the Labour Party who's actually talking about this. The Tories were talking last week about reducing taxes for higher earners, which is, I mean, I talk about an own goal.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
When I read that in the Financial Times, I could hardly believe what I was reading. But look, I don't think anybody's suggesting that.
Well, maybe they know that it's over for them, so they're just, like, putting things in that will help.
Well, it's a bit like Corbyn in 2019 when he said free broadband for everybody. God, there's a certain element of that. Look, the reality is the infrastructure, the national infrastructure in this country is in the worst state it's ever been. You know, our schools are collapsing, our prisons are full, the transport system isn't working. The idea of cutting tax for the upper, the upper echelons, the wealthier people, it's insane. I don't understand it. So the fact that people are saying that the Labour Party might cut taxes, I think that is actually more about their horror as they stand back from the Conservative Party rather than anything brilliant that Labour's done.
Well, both parties should absolutely be cutting tax. Taxes are a post-World War II high. We've tried the model of taxation, borrowing and spending a way to managing the economy, and it hasn't worked. Public sector, as you've just rightly said, Stephen, is broken right across the board. So government managing things, this hugely interventionist approach we've had from governments ever since Tony Blair took office, is wrong. It doesn't work. We've got to cut taxes. And what the government needs to learn, and the Labour Party needs to learn, is that you don't cut taxes always looking at how you balance the books. You have to understand that when you cut taxes, you will generate growth. And when you generate growth, you will get more money coming into the exchequer. They have to cut taxes, as you rightly said, Nana, on businesses.
Oh,
it's critical.
Terrible.
And it's not the rich that need the tax cuts. It's the working and middle classes. We need to get our domestic labour market more active.
I just can't imagine what they were thinking. I mean, you know, because I'm probably a natural Conservative voter if I was going to vote for someone. But I can't vote for that.
No, you can't.
Because it doesn't make any sense. Why would you cut tax for the top earners when it's the middle class who need the tax cuts because they have the highest burden?
Absolutely. But if you want change, if you want sensible politics, you cannot any longer vote for the Conservatives or Labour. There's only one party you should vote for.
No.
Who's that?
This will not be a party political broadcast.
This has been you cannot do party election broadcasts on TV.
But there's no election going on. There's no election going on.
There's no election, but no, listen, I mean, look, who do you guys think?
Listen, you've done very well in 2 by-elections. Just rest on your laurels.
Yeah, but look, I mean, look, we're going to be talking about this throughout the show as well. Stay with me. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. You can keep your thoughts coming as well. I'd love to hear what you think. I've got loads on the way in the next hour. We'll be talking about the Great British debate. I'll be asking if the BBC have been prejudiced in their reporting of the Hamas conflict. What do you think? Get in touch. You know the coup. Plus, I've got a fabulous mystery guest for you in my outside part of the programme, which is just after 5 o'clock. And joining me for the main debates, of course, with the fabulous Danny Kelly and the brilliant Matthew Laza. They're on the way. Stay tuned. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Don't forget, you can stream the show live on YouTube or download the GB News app. More to come in the next hour.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to the forthcoming week, and for most of us, unfortunately, it is staying unsettled. Further spells of wind and rain to come. But for now, this area low pressure, which has been responsible for the very heavy rainfall, has now cleared. But unfortunately, further areas of low pressure are waiting in the Atlantic. But back to this evening, for most of us, it should be a fairly dry and clear night. Perfect recipe for a chilly night, actually, especially for Scotland, Northern England. Could see a widespread frost, and after the very wet weather what we've had, could just see some icy stretches. So just do take care if you are out and about. Could just see a few showers for Northern Ireland, may just creep into parts of Western Cornwall too, but elsewhere, a dry start to the day. Could just see a few mist and fog patches first thing too, but really it's going to set us up for a largely dry picture. Best of the sunshine as we go through the course of the day will be across parts of Scotland and Northern England. Still the risk of some rain just moving into Northern Ireland and the far west of Cornwall at times, and for most of us temperatures very similar to recent days, 10s to 12s in the north, potentially up to 15 to 16 degrees in the south. Looking ahead to Tuesday, a band of rain will spread its way northwards during the course of the day, so fairly wet affair for a good chunk of the UK, potentially staying dry for most of the day in Scotland, but unfortunately middle of the week stays fairly unsettled for all of us.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Hello, good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Also, former Labour Party advisor Matthew Lazar. But before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines with Lisa.
Good afternoon, it's 4 o'clock. I'm Lisa Hartle in the GB Newsroom. Israel's Prime Minister has told troops the war against Hamas is do or die for his country. Benjamin Netanyahu's comments come as the military prepares to launch another offensive in Gaza following overnight airstrikes. The Palestinian Health Ministry says 266 people, including 117 children, have been killed in the past 24 hours. Israel has now issued a warning to residents in the north of the Strip, telling them to head south or they may be identified as sympathisers of a terrorist organisation. IDF spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner says forces are only targeting Hamas.
We know how extensive their tunnel mechanisms is and how they are operating and using them. So we're confident we have good intelligence, but the realm of warfare is it's not the known knowns, it's the unknown knowns. And so we know that we have a brutal enemy. We don't know exactly what they're doing. We have a good grasp of their operational capabilities, and we need to confront that and remove that as if it was a tumour.
Former head of the Palestinian diplomatic mission to the UK, Manuel Hassassian, says he still believes in a two-state solution.
Don't try to put us, all in a frame that we are terrorists as Palestinians. There is a difference between the Palestinian people who want peace and security, and there is a difference between the Palestinian Authority, which is the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, who believe in a two-state solution, who have condemned violence all along. The question is, can Israel stop state terrorism on equal basis? That's a question.
Meanwhile, witnesses are saying they heard a blast and the sound of ambulances near the Rafah crossing. It happened after a second convoy of aid was allowed to enter Gaza. Yesterday, 20 trucks delivered supplies to the Strip after the border with Egypt was opened for the first time in 2 weeks. The UN World Food Programme is describing the humanitarian situation in Gaza as catastrophic. Violence in the region is spreading, with Israel launching airstrikes in the occupied West Bank. A compound beneath a mosque in the Jenin refugee camp was hit. The Israeli military claims it was being used by militants to organise attacks. Palestinian medics say 2 people were killed and several others injured. Meanwhile, in London, an Israel solidarity rally is taking place in Trafalgar Square. The Bring Them Home protest is calling for the release of all hostages being held by Hamas. Relatives and friends are holding posters of those who are missing or believed to have been kidnapped. It comes after days of pro-Palestinian protests and claims some people are inciting violence. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick says the accusations are being taken seriously.
I've written to all chief constables across the country saying that they should refer individuals that come to their attention to the Home Office. There is a legal process to be followed, but as and when we receive those, we will consider them, and if they meet the legal bar, then we will absolutely revoke and expel them, and the first case is already under consideration.
A search and rescue operation is underway off the Kent coast following reports a man on a passenger ship fell overboard. German cruise company Ada says it has reason to believe it was a crew member of the Ada Perla who is missing from the vessel. The alarm was raised just before 9 o'clock this morning and the ship returned to the site where it's thought the incident happened. Lifeboats supported by a helicopter are also searching the area near Ramsgate. 2 new danger to life weather warnings have been issued in England in the wake of Storm Babette. Severe flood warnings are in place around the River Idle near Retford in Nottinghamshire, which is expected to reach record levels. The number of people who've died during the storm has risen to 4 after police found the body of a woman in her 80s in Chesterfield. Manchester United has opened a book of condolence at Old Trafford following the death of Sir Bobby Charlton. The legendary footballer was a key member of England's World Cup winning team in 1966. Floral tributes and football shirts are being placed outside the Manchester United Stadium, with his former club saying he'll always be remembered as a giant of the game. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now, let's return to Nana.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Let me get this straight. It seems the policing of language doesn't stretch as far as calling for jihad. which has several meanings, but since the late 20th century, the word has gained a very negative reputation, often being used by terrorist movements to legitimise their cause and motivate their followers. Examples of this would be the Afghan Mujahideen, the Taliban and the Northern Alliance. They waged a jihad in Afghanistan against foreign forces and each other. There was Algeria's armed Islamic group who waged a jihad of terror against the government there. Remember Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda and the waging of a global jihad against Muslim governments and the West. And, of course, Hezbollah, Hamas and Islamic Jihad Palestine have also characterised war with Israel as a jihad. The policing of language also doesn't appear to stretch as far as chanting "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," which, according to the American Jewish Committee, is a common call to arms for pro-Palestinian activists. It calls for the establishment of a state of Palestine from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, erasing the state of Israel and its people. It's also a rallying cry for terrorist groups and their sympathisers, from the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine to Hamas, which called for Israel's destruction in its original governing charter in 1988 and was responsible for the terror attack on Israeli civilians on the 7th of October, which was the single deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust. So you'd think that when protesters chant "From the river to the sea" and call for jihad in support of the people of Palestine, who, let's face it, are run by Hamas, who are a de facto governing body and a proscribed terrorist organisation, the latter the BBC has thus far refused to directly call them, you'd think that this would be a red flag. Why on earth are people allowed to call for jihad in the streets of the UK?
It's very important to me and the Home Secretary that people who spread hate or support proscribed terrorist organisations like Hamas have no place in this country. A visa is a special privilege. It's not an entitlement. And if you commit comments that create hate or spread anti-Semitism, then you forfeit that privilege and you should have that visa revoked and you should be expelled from the UK.
Well, that was Robert Jenrick. Well, words have power, as Suella Braverman was reminded when she rightly called the invasion of the southern coast in this country just that. I mean, she's right, by the way. Yet, ironically, in this country, we have a civil service that spends a fortune on policing of language and diversity and inclusion. You know, the other day we heard Labour would make misgendering a hate crime, even though their leader took 2 years to confirm what a woman is. We have a police force in which some were not long ago wearing rainbow laces, driving rainbow cars and taking the knee. Yet chanting "From the river to the sea" and calling for jihad seems to be OK, according to them. The same police that showed up in force when someone tweeted something bad and created hurty feelings. Earlier on GB News, the former head of the Palestinian diplomatic mission to the UK, Manuel Hussein, told us that he still believes in a two-state solution.
Don't try to put us, all in a frame that we are terrorists as Palestinians. There is a difference between the Palestinian people who want peace and security, and there is a difference between the Palestinian Authority, which is the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, who believe in a two-state solution, who have condemned violence all along. The question is, can Israel stop state terrorism on equal basis? That's a question.
Now, I get that we have freedom of speech in this country, but in my view, I draw the line when you're calling for what many interpret as death to innocent people. I want to see peace and forgiveness from both sides. No life is above another's, so I'm equally sad for the death of innocent Palestinians. But whilst you are free to speak in this country, words have consequences, and it's time to stop conflating freedom of speech with the freedom of consequences for those words. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, have the BBC been prejudiced in their reporting of the Hamas conflict? A former director of the corporation has accused the broadcast of failures over its reporting of the Israel-Hamas war, saying that they rushed to judgment last week when it announced that Israel was responsible for the bombing of a hospital. Do you agree that the BBC have been biased in their reporting? Then at 4:50, it's time for Worldview. We'll cross to Los Angeles with Paul Dudridge to get the latest on the build-up to a US election where Donald Trump's leading in the polls over Joe Biden, even among the under-30s. We'll find out what this means for the Biden campaign and if we expect Trump to return to power. Plus, the chairman of the Jewish National Assembly, Gary Mond, will join me in the studio and will be speaking on the protest by the Jewish community in central London, demanding the release of over 200 people abducted by Hamas. Then stay tuned at 5 o'clock. It's this week's Outside. A millionaire property tycoon who rose to fame when he married a woman he'd never met before on a reality show, Married at First Sight. Oh, God, I love that. Stay tuned. Who do you think he is? That's coming up in the next hour, so tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. All right, so before we get to my panellists, I want to have a chat with Olivia Utley because demonstrations are gathering in London's Trafalgar Square to demand the release of hostages being held by Hamas. So our political correspondent, Olivia Utley, is there now. Olivia, so and now I see people are there. Can you update me with the latest developments in London?
In many cases, after killing their family or...
Oh, well, I thought she was about to speak, but listen, we will come back to her. But whilst we're doing that, let's see what my panel make of my monologue. Let's welcome on the former Labour advisor, Matthew Laza, and also journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly. Matthew Laza, I'm going to start with you. OK, so these chants in the streets. Olivia is at the pro-Israeli protest now.
I would say it's more of a vigil, actually. It looked very dignified from the pictures that we saw there. Very specific, very clear in its message and very dignified from what we saw. OK, but just for equal language, because they're gathering to people. Of course, absolutely. And, of course, they are protesting with regard to the war. Of course.
It would be wrong for me to say one was a vigil and the other one was that.
Absolutely.
So I'm levelling the playing field here and calling it a protest, which I believe it is, and they are protesting about what is happening. What are your views, though, with regard to the words of jihad and obviously the phrases from the river to the sea, which has been spoken, which most people would admit is quite a negative chant?
Absolutely. Look, I think that the protests have been a disaster, both from a policing point of view, but also from the point of view of the protesters themselves, because they haven't been focused in what they're saying. They haven't gained wider public support. Frankly, they've done exactly the reverse. I think they've put a lot of people's backs up because, of course, not everybody there was singing that particularly hateful song, but some people were. And that's what happens with protests, is that everybody gets tarred with the same brush. And I think the difference that in the two protests that we've seen is that the one today is very clear. It's calling for the return of the hostages. Now, I think people who see themselves as being on the worrying about Palestine in particular, they should be absolutely clear. They should be, if they were making a clear demand, which is, let water in now, or let's switch the electricity back on, or get Hamas out and get everybody out and give the people of Gaza a future, then that would be engaging a wider public. Instead, it's just become a sort of fest where people are just sort of shouting random slogans at best and singing that hateful song at worst. And the police are just standing by. And we saw this week, didn't we? It's very much the images that we're seeing at the protest, the pictures of people who are being held hostage, the guy with the ad van that went round in central London, the police, he was being attacked or certainly pressured by people on the other side of the argument, and instead of being sort of protected, the police told him to turn the ad van off, turn off the pictures of the missing and get out of there, and wouldn't let somebody from his organisation come and speak to him. So I do not think the police are covering themselves in glory. It looks like the government is trying to get a grip on this, but frankly, they need to get a grip fast.
Danny Kelly.
The old bill, the Metropolitan Police, I think they were damned if they did and damned if they didn't, because there's a serious risk of a potential violent disturbance of the peace. If the old bill start lifting people just because they're chanting, and I've got to admit, until your monologue, I never really analysed what those words meant. And I'm wondering that if I wasn't really across what the words meant and the significance of it, and it's open to interpretation. Your subjective interpretation suggests that from one side of the country to the Mediterranean Sea, which means that Israel is removed. Other people may not have that same interpretation. So I think people would innocently, some people, just be singing it because they're getting along and they're getting involved with the protest. Well, I didn't know the interpretation.
Yeah, but you wouldn't just join into any old chant of any old thing.
No, but I think that you have a subjective interpretation of what it means. Other people may not hold that, including the plot, including the Metropolitan Police.
No, but I would say that if that is the case, the Metropolitan Police should get on the case and understand what it is they're protesting or what it is they're going to a demonstration with regard for. But I'm assuming that, and I would expect that they would be briefed on what the protest is about, and they would be told as to what that they need to be looking looking out for, so they are unified in their approach. And in my view, that chant has been associated with negative connotations, as well as the word jihad. Yeah. And after the incidents that happened on the 7th of October, and of course the ensuing war that has followed, that cannot be allowed on the streets of this country. It's not that I'm against freedom of speech, but I think we have to draw the line when it potentially...
There are sectarian chants at every Scottish football game, Rangers and Celtic.
Yeah.
Now, the alternative, if we're going to apply the same rationale, then if we're going to start lifting people in London for singing that song, then the Scottish police are going to have to start going in mob-handed and pulling out football fans.
They did try and pass a law on that and realised it was not going to work in Scotland.
But there's no war, though, is there, between Celtic and Rangers?
No, but it's inciting violence towards religion, which is not too dissimilar.
Well, yeah, but under the backdrop of what is happening, I think that the police have to put things into context of what's going on with respect to that. So, just in my view, that is not really... If I was making a judgment call, I wouldn't want that. And also because there is the potential for it to increase the terrorist risk as well. So we are, remember, a lot of these people who are calling for jihad, those kind of people, there's a lot of lone wolves, and it could encourage and make this country a less safer place to be.
If you were gold commander on the day, notice I didn't say bronze or silver. If you were gold commander...
Try platinum, darling.
No, that's with the police, it's gold as well.
Is it only gold?
Yeah. What would you have done? Would you have ordered your police to go and start lifting people for that?
I don't know what I would have done with regard to that. I'm tempted to think that I might have gone the way of France and made sure that this sort of thing couldn't happen. But then, you have to realise that it's freedom of speech, and I think people should be allowed to protest as ever. But I do think that the line, we have to draw the line, and I think perhaps the police could have taken out some of those people who were doing that, or using body cam to identify people and later contact them later and find them or something. So there should be a punishment for later, because a lot of these people, they work, they've got good jobs, most of them are good people, but if you get caught under the wind of something that's negative, you might be chanting negative things.
Absolutely. All the most effective... I don't particularly like demos. I may be on the left, but I spend my life not going on demos, which people assume people on the left do. And the most effective demos are those which draw in the widest support, which aren't just sort of talking to in the bubble of your own supporters, but are drawing in new people to your cause. And frankly, you just want to say to whatever your cause, building a ramshackle stage on the Cenotaph is not going to get the great British public of any background in favour of you. So I think you're right that there needs to be a firmer policing, but also the people who are organising these demonstrations need to think about what is it actually doing for the cause that they're trying to promote.
Just finally, for me, Robert Jenrick, there's a subtle message here. He's going in a new direction. That if you're new to this country and you start protesting against values that are decent Western values, then you're not welcome. And that's an interesting
and
new
he's
line.
the immigration minister, so that's interesting.
Then you're not welcome.
I think he's right. I think he's right with regard to that. If you're going to, it's fine to come here. I believe when in Rome do as the Romans. So I think, but don't come in and then sort of behave in such a negative fashion and sort of diss the place that you're staying,
It's an interesting...
Don't poop on your own doorstep.
Don't get me started on the alleged tube driver who allegedly promoted. People may have seen it, but the footage of a tube driver, his train was packed with people going to the demonstration yesterday, and he was sort of saying, "Have a good day," and may peace be with you, etc. I mean, just think if you were a Jewish passenger on that train, or frankly somebody who just didn't take the side of the Palestinians. So that is being investigated now, but action must be taken. But we need people to calm down.
But do they know it's definitely the tube driver?
They don't. That's why they're looking into it. So we need to see. Yeah, absolutely.
It could be
if it does turn out to be correct. We need everybody in public life, and that includes tube drivers who have a responsibility. We need everybody to calm down and look at things calmly, because we don't want conflict breaking out.
No, we don't want that.
And they're on about 70 grand a year, tube drivers.
They certainly are.
God. Anyway,
it's a great job.
Well, listen, if you just joined us, welcome aboard. It's just coming up to 19 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online, and on digital radio. Coming up, World View will be on the way. We'll be discussing the latest on the Israel-Hamas war and its impact on the UK and crossing live to Los Angeles. But up next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, have the BBC been prejudiced in their reporting of the conflict? And I've got a poll up on X right now asking you that very question. Have the BBC been prejudiced on their reporting of the Hamas conflict? Cast your vote now.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country.
only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Can you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Good afternoon, 23 minutes after 4 o'clock. If you've just tuned in, welcome on board. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. And it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. I've been asking, had the BBC been prejudiced in their reporting of the Hamas conflict? The broadcaster has faced criticism for their coverage of the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. And Director General Tim Davies is set to face a major probe from Tory MPs in the coming days. Senior sources have told GB News that the BBC boss will be questioned over the refusal to describe Hamas as a terrorist organisation. And earlier this week, Israel accused the BBC of perpetuating modern blood libel over their reporting of the strike on the hospital in Gaza. The corporation has admitted that their reporter was wrong to speculate as to which side had struck the hospital, or whether it had struck the hospital at all. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, have the BBC been prejudiced in their reporting for the Hamas conflict? Now joining me to discuss is Stephen Pound, former Labour Party MP, Ben Habib, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, and Neil Parish, former Conservative MP. I'm going to start with you, Neil Parish. Neil?
Hello?
Yes, we're still
Yes.
hearing you.
Yes, you can hear me, can you?
Yeah, go for it. So
Yes.
what's your thoughts?
My thoughts are that it's right that the BBC cover both sides, you know, naturally Israel and Palestinian Hamas. But what I've heard, especially sometimes on Radio 4, is that I rather feel that when the Palestinian sort of Hamas spokesman is on, they're not challenged enough really on why Israel is taking this action, you know.
Oh, I wanted to hear that as well. We've lost him. You've frozen in time We'll come back to you. It's an interesting shot. He's frozen on, he's gone. We'll try and pick him up. We'll try and get him back on. But I'm going to go to Stephen Pound then. Stephen Pound.
This kind of reminds me of in my time in Northern Ireland when the BBC referred to Derry/Londonderry to try to avoid giving offence to anybody. Look, the BBC is tying itself in knots, and the reason they are desperately making themselves, frankly, looking rather foolish on this is because they no longer have exclusive rights to the national broadcasting platform. They are no longer the only game in town, and I don't think we have to look too far around us today to see the alternative broadcasting medium that exists. So they're desperately trying to somehow avoid giving offence to anybody, and by doing so, they give offence to a lot of people.
Which is quite sad. Ben Habib, what's your thought?
Well, I mean, I think the BBC have taken an unbelievably oversimplistic approach to the whole debate. You know, they've painted this as the Palestinians versus the State of Israel, but it isn't. Of course, this is Hamas acting as a terrorist organisation attacking Israel. There's a perfectly sensible other part of the Palestinian organisation, you know, Fatah, which operates in the West Bank, that was effectively in conflict with Hamas, and they've made their peace with Israel. This is, and the other thing that I feel the BBC have entirely missed out on, and indeed most mainstream media has failed to pick up on, is that Hamas are acting as Iran's useful idiots. And they've been put into bat in order to undermine the impending, imminent recognition of Israel by Saudi Arabia, in return for which Saudi was going to get nuclear technology from the United States of America. This is so obviously an attempt by Iran to set the Saudi relationship with the US and with Israel back. Lots of Arab nations, the UAE, for example, Egypt, for example, have accepted the existence of the State of Israel, and they've done very well on the back of it. And it's Iran that is standing in the way.
We'll just come back to the BBC, because that's what we're talking about.
Yeah,
Neil
but
Parish.
the BBC needs to call them out.
OK, Neil Parish.
Yeah, sorry, I think I got cut off, didn't I, just now with the system. But yes, Nana, I feel that the BBC, like I said, when you get the Hamas Palestinians spoken on in the morning, especially on Radio 4, they're just not challenged enough as to why Israel is taking this action in the first place. The fact, you know, the murderous Hamas and butchering women and children in Israel, Israelis. And so that is why I think, you know, and also when it came to the bombing of the hospital, they jumped in very, very quickly. It's definitely Israel. Well, you know, the jury's out on that at the very least. And so therefore, I think, you know, they will have to be careful.
Yeah, because I think they sort of think that they're being moderate and you know, acting by being impartial, by not calling it out as a terrorist organisation. But if you've read parts of the covenant for Hamas, you will read that they want to kill all the Jews. I mean, that's pretty much...
Well, that's what it says on the tin, but
well,
I mean, equally, yeah, the Iranian constitution says the same thing. But I think the point that Neil made about the Church of England hospital, which is, you know, funded by the Anglican Church, for heaven's sake, in Gaza City, is interesting because, in fact, it didn't hit the hospital, it hit the car park of the hospital.
Yeah, exactly.
And all the evidence, if you actually look at the trail of where the missile was launched from, you know, to say that it actually came from Israel or bombed by Israel is really facile. So, but I think this is where the BBC... May I just have a little bit of sympathy for the BBC, because, I mean, dear old Auntie BBC, on her day, she was damn good. Yeah. I'm not entirely sure that day still prevails.
Well, and to be fair, you know, they're not here to respond, so, you know, we can talk about them and say...
Yeah, but I have to spend money on it. I have to buy a flipping licence, so I've got a right to say it.
But the point is that then they aren't here to defend themselves, so we have to be fair to them. But on this occasion, it was quite clear that they reported on something very quickly, potentially because, you know, with us news broadcasters, we do want to be the first ones to report on it. But being first also means that you need to check all your facts, and it didn't even seem quite right, because actually Al Jazeera were filming at the time, and you saw the missiles take off, and then it looked like one went backwards, and then there was a little explosion, which was around about where the hospital is.
The fuel tanker.
Exactly. So I'm not saying that is definitely it, but it was pretty close. I mean, Ben, did you see that?
I didn't see the footage. I've read about it, and the number dead as well seems to have been exaggerated. Yeah. But, of course, there's always going to be misinformation coming out through the fog of war, and we've got to take everything we now hear with a pinch of salt. But I go back to what are the big consequences for the United Kingdom here? It's not about Israel kicking off against Hamas or Hamas kicking off against Israel. The big geopolitical concern that we have in the West is what is going to happen in the Middle East on a broader basis. That's why there are 2 American aircraft carriers there. That's why we've sent ships there. And it's much more to do with Iran, Saudi Arabia, and of course Hezbollah, Lebanon in the north, where another.
So are you saying that you'd rather the BBC sort of focus on a lot more of that?
I think
rather than just...
I think we need some proper journalism around why this is happening and who the main actors are and what risks we as a country face as a result of what's going on.
Because of course they've got all the resource, they've got all the money. We have to pay for it anyway, so they could be doing that. And last word to you, Neil Parish.
Yeah, just very much, you know, the BBC, when they cover it, they just must challenge Hamas and the Palestinians, and they mustn't just leave them to rant against Israel. And I think they just must be seen to be fair, and they can broaden it, as everybody else has said, the arguments as well. But I think, you know, we just really must concentrate on why is Israel taking this action? Would we be taking this sort of action if we'd had innocent women, men and children actually murdered? I suspect we would. And I think that's what they miss very often with this whole argument.
But will the BBC exist in its present form in 10 years' time? I say no.
Well, that's another discussion.
Well, I think that's the crux of what we're talking about here, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but we're talking about actually this at the moment. But thank you very much, Neil Parish. Good to talk to you, Stephen Fallon, Ben Habib. What do you think? That's what they think. That's their views. GBviews at gbnews.com or tweet me at GBnews. This is GB News. Coming up, we'll continue with the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, have the BBC been prejudiced in their reporting of the Hamas conflict? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, former advisor to the Labour Party, Matthew Laza, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Then, still to come, my mystery guest in this week's Outside. They are a reality TV star turned professional boxer who rose to fame when he married a woman he'd never met before on a reality show, Married at First Sight. First, though, let's get your latest headlines with Lisa.
It's 4:31. I'm Lisa Hartle in the GB newsroom. Israel's Prime Minister has told troops the war against Hamas is do or die for his country. Benjamin Netanyahu's comments come as a fresh wave of airstrikes hit Gaza. This was a scene in the city just a few minutes ago. Israel had issued an urgent warning to residents in the north of the Strip ahead of the bombardment, telling them to head south or they may be identified as sympathisers of a terrorist organisation. Meanwhile, witnesses are saying they heard a blast and the sound of ambulances near the Rafah crossing. It happened after a second convoy of aid was allowed to enter Gaza. Yesterday, 20 trucks delivered supplies to the Strip after the border with Egypt was opened for the first time in 2 weeks. The UN World Food Programme is describing the humanitarian situation in Gaza as catastrophic. Meanwhile, in London, an Israel solidarity rally is taking place in Trafalgar Square. The Bring Them Home protest is calling for the release of all hostages being held by Hamas. Relatives and friends are holding posters of those who are missing or believed to have been kidnapped. It comes after days of pro-Palestinian protests, along with claims some people have been inciting violence. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick says the accusations are being taken seriously. 2 new danger to life weather warnings have been issued in England in the wake of Storm Babette. Severe flood warnings are in place around the River Idle near Retford in Nottinghamshire, which is expected to reach record levels. The number of people who've died during the storm has risen to 4 after police found the body of a woman in her 80s in Chesterfield. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting the website gbnews.com. Now it's back to Nana.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
News.
Welcome back. It's just coming up to 38 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. It's time now for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, have the BBC been prejudiced in their reporting of the Hamas conflict? Now, the broadcaster has faced criticism for their coverage of the ongoing conflict. In the coming days, Director General Tim Davie is set to be questioned by Tory MPs over the BBC's refusal to describe Hamas as a terrorist organisation. And earlier this week, facing a backlash, the corporation admitted that their reporter was wrong to speculate as to which side had struck the hospital in Gaza. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, have the BBC been prejudiced in their reporting of Hamas? Right, so let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by former Labour advisor Matthew Lauser and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. I'm going to start with you, Danny Kelly, because I know you worked for the BBC.
Ex-BBC, 15 years, 16 years, something like that. Biggest show on local radio.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, go on then. So
he was going back then in a bit of memory lane.
I was.
Frustrations.
Happier days. OK, the BBC is...
You got fired, didn't you?
I did get fired for being a 50-year-old white guy. And yes, we've discussed it before.
Well, carry on.
Anyway, so the BBC, I think, have got this wrong. Now, their defence, it's a bit like the Gary Lineker defence. Now, Gary Lineker, 6 months ago, said the government's using language associated with 1930s Germany. The Daily Mail, the next day, prints a headline comparing, conflating, understandably, with Nazi Germany. Lineker says, I never mentioned Nazis, and they've done it again.
He never mentioned Nazi Germany.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, he must think that we are absolute idiots. And the BBC are treating us with contempt here because their reporter said that it's hard to see what else this could be, really, given the size of the explosion, other than an Israeli airstrike or several airstrikes. And then his boss defends by saying, well, he at no point reported that it was an Israeli airstrike. It's the Lineker defence. He's telling us a message, Lineker and this journalist, he is pointing us in the direction of either Nazi Germany or an Israeli bomb. But they haven't implicitly said it. And that's no
obviously
defence.
Gary has nothing to do with this particular comment.
No, but
I know what you're using it as an example.
The defence is, well, I never actually said that. Yeah. Yes, you did. in not so many words. Of course you have.
Yeah, that was pretty lame, yeah.
Yeah, I think, look, I mean, I was at the BBC for a similar amount of time. I wasn't fired, I'm just going to point that out.
Neither was I.
Because I wasn't 50.
I was
and you were there too.
And
so
I'm not a white
man, I'm a white man, but I'm not quite 50, almost. But in all seriousness, I think the problem we've got here is the reporter made a mistake. And
it was a big mistake.
It was a big mistake, and I think Danny's right. That the mistake has been compounded by the BBC trying to defend it by saying that he didn't say what he's on the record and the clip is there of him having said. And I think, you know, this all stems from the big decision not to use the word terrorists, even after the events we saw 2 weeks ago with the attacks by Hamas. And so now they've got this sort of pro-BBC compromise, which has taken only 2 weeks to work out, which is they will not use the word militant as de facto, which is they're using before.
The damage has been done.
Exactly, Nana. The damage has been done, and I think, therefore, people in the field are being let down. So we're hearing today that extra counselling and mental health support is being given to BBC people, both at home and those in the field.
Are we paying for that?
What for?
Because of the stress that they're under.
Well, what
I mean, it is stressful reporting from a war zone.
I agree with that, but what about the journalists everywhere else? No. Look, I mean, that's the job, isn't it? You're a journalist.
So that's what they do. Yeah, I'm reporting that neutrally. That they are. That the guy who's doing this out was a friend of mine, and he's announced that it will be offered to everybody, not just those in the conflict, because apparently people are getting shouted at dinner parties.
That's typical.
But do you know what though? I mean, look, it's all very well, but if you have to own what you say. So if you say things that are wrong, and then they cause. The problem with the BBC is that it has such a global image worldwide, and it has BBC World Service and such a wonderful... It is a wonderful bastion of what this country is about, or it was at least. And it is unfortunate, but it's also had its own journalists in the Middle East making comments which are anti-Semitic, and, you know, there is an issue with that, and... I don't know how it's going to...
I think the problem...
After what they said, very quickly,
Nana.
is that Joe Biden was supposed to be meeting some people, and then, of course, that meeting with some of the Arab leaders was turned down because, I think, as a result of a lot of what was said, because they thought that perhaps Israel had created this, bombed this hospital.
Yeah, look, as you say, it was a very, very serious mistake in the reporting. Now, look, it is, you know, it's very difficult reporting from a conflict zone. Mistakes do happen, but he should have acknowledged the mistake, and then the BBC shouldn't have tried to defend the indefensible. They should have said this was said in the heat of the moment. This is actually, you know, what should have been said. And I think it's kind of lions led by donkeys in the sense that the management, I mean, to take 2 weeks to a compromise that we won't use the word militant as the go-to is just ridiculous. And I think one of the problems with the World Service is because there have been so many cuts, what's happened is rather than and also there's a sort of slightly woke feeling that they shouldn't have, you know, white men or indeed anybody from the UK reporting from the zones. It's that they hire a lot of people locally. They give them a kind of 1 week course on BBC values, and therefore, you know, it's often hard to do it. And of course, the management don't speak languages, so people who knows what they're reporting.
But this guy, wasn't he British?
This guy was British. I mean, in terms of the people who liked the tweets, the anti-Semitic tweets.
Yeah, but they're still journalists, and they still.
Oh, I'm not excusing it. I'm saying it's a problem.
And they are part of, you know, they may well be freelancers and stuff.
No, actually they're employed, but they're employed locally, and they're not given enough supervision to ensure they grab a BBC service. So their management need to sort it out.
Another inadequate defence or excuse of the BBC. They say that they will use the words terror attacks. I remember Nigel Farage interviewing someone who's represented the BBC in this studio about 5 or 6 days ago, and he legitimised it by saying we can use the word terror attacks. And I was screaming at the telly, Nigel, ask him who perpetuates, who's the perpetrator of a terror attack? Nigel, ask the question. If that's a terror attack, what are they? Who are they?
If you have a terror attack, you must be. It's this spinning on the head of a sixpence, or whatever the phrase is. That it's just the management need to be much more reactive and not get themselves in this mess, because, as you say, that shatters the BBC's reputation.
Well, it is a shame, but of course the BBC are not here to defend themselves. But I mean, you know, you saw it, you watched it, and those are the words that journalist did say. So we are simply asking the question whether you think that they're perhaps being biased in their reporting. Keep your thoughts coming. gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GBNews. But this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voices, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics that we're discussing. Amanda Hindley, she is there in Kent. Amanda. Right, so nice to see you. Your hair looks lovely. I'm going to get a wig just like that. Just like that. Amanda, talk to me. What do you think, then? Are they a bit biased in their reporting? Are they embarrassing themselves, or have you come to expect that from the BBC?
I mean, I think when it comes to reporting something, especially the atrocities that we're seeing at the moment in the Middle East, I think everything that we hear from all mainstream media needs to be taken with a pinch of salt. But unfortunately, the BBC have got themselves in a rather sticky situation again. The reporter, I understand he's a human and maybe there was a knee-jerk reaction there because he is reporting in a war zone. But the fact that the BBC didn't react straight away to apologise or to rectify the situation, they are themselves, as well as not using the word terrorist, are inciting prejudice within themselves. So I think it was their fault.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because on one side they want to remain impartial, but on the other side they're thinking that impartial means, and to be honest, calling someone a terrorist is not, you're not making a judgment. If that person is behaving in the manner of a terrorist and does terrorist things, then they are a terrorist, isn't it? So
Absolutely. And they're trying so hard to be impartial because they're not the only media outlet now. They're trying so hard that they are making themselves impartial.
Yeah. Well, listen, Amanda, thank you very much. Always good to talk to you. That's Amanda Hindley. She's there in Kent. She's my brilliant TV voice. Right, so I'm going to come quickly back to you two then. Yes, so do you...
I thought Amanda nailed it, really.
She did.
It was a really, really good contribution. Absolutely. But they don't realise that the rest of the media landscape is making them look foolish.
I'd like to compliment Amanda on her hair, too, and a beautiful smile.
I never talk about hair for rather obvious reasons.
You and me, together. I think Amanda's hit the nail on the head. The BBC is just trying so hard to be impartial. It's coming across as being partial. You know, call a terrorist a terrorist. Doesn't mean that you're taking sides. Yeah. No one is taking a side by calling somebody the noun. That is accurate. They're a terrorist.
So do you think, then, in a word, that they're being biased in their reporting?
Listen,
yes,
16 years at the BBC, they have a left-leaning Palestinian pro-bias, in my opinion.
So the answer is yes, you think they are biased. And what about you?
I think that report clearly was. Maybe by accident, and therefore the comeback by management is just a total mess.
Yeah, they take too long. Just apologise quickly.
Absolutely.
Well, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is a GB News coming up in the next hour. It's time for the Great British Debate, and I'll be asking whether Suella Braverman, when Suella Braverman says migrant crossings are an invasion, do you agree with her choice of words? It's all about words today. But first, up next, it's Worldview.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Can you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Good afternoon. If you just joined us, welcome on board. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Don't forget as well, you can download the GB News app. I'm Nana Akua, and it's time now for World View. So let's reflect on the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. Demonstrators are currently gathering in London's Trafalgar Square to demand the release of hostages being held by Hamas in the Gaza Strip. So joining me now is the chairman of the National Jewish Assembly, Gary Mond. Now, Gary, we spoke last week, and I know this week, on the Monday, you were at the BBC at the protests there. So give me an update as to what's been going on and what your members are saying.
Well, we had 1,500 members at the demonstration, a number of speakers from the media, from Israel, and also from grassroots groups. And I think that the message is just starting to percolate through to the BBC. But, of course, they're being very mealy-mouthed in what they're saying and doing about the use of the word terrorist. They don't seem to be prepared, in spite of what they've said, to actually call Hamas out as terrorists. And then no sooner do we focus on that area, then there's, of course, the way they reported on the issue concerning the car park in the hospital in Gaza City, where they blamed Israel before they even actually took the chance to find out the facts. It's appalling.
Well, it took them... The problem is, and obviously, you know, I don't want to bash the BBC because I have a lot of respect. I've been trained by them. They have some amazing qualities. But on this particular issue, I think they have a bit of a conflict of interests, because on one side they're saying they want to be impartial, and on the other side they're not able to call something out for what it is, as if it had been judged for doing that.
I think this is something that's been going on for many years. It's not just a development with regard to this particular war. We've got 2 enormous examples as from this particular war. But if you were looking back at 2014 and other conflicts, a similar sort of bias against Israel in favour of its enemies has developed.
You think?
Yes.
I mean, some people would say that isn't the case because they do... I mean, I think there were some Palestinians who were also protesting, saying that the BBC were not being fair to them either. So sometimes... But, I mean, look, on this one incident, I have to 100% be with you on that. They got it. I don't know whether they got it wrong or right with regard to the hospital, but they were too far ahead and they hadn't checked their details.
There's evidence to show that it was a missile from the Palestinians.
There is evidence. I mean, and it's widely thought that is the case. Yes. So beyond that, then what else has been going on? Because obviously the conflict is still happening. What are your members saying?
I think we actually need to look at one issue that's not often covered, is what's going on inside Israel.
Right.
We've got 300,000 to 400,000 young people and middle-aged people being called up. That's the equivalent of 3 million to 4 million in Britain. We've got 100 to 150,000 Israelis having to leave home and be moved. That's like 1 to 1.5 million people in Britain. These are astonishingly high numbers, and Israeli life is being badly affected by the war, and that is not often felt. And the other issue that people are getting nervous about is we're starting to hear from politicians the use of the word Israel needs to restrain itself. Israel needs to do what's in its best interests, and that's a matter for Israel's government. And whatever that is, it is. And Israel must be supported. You can't say we support Israel on the one hand, but on the other hand, the moment they do something that you feel is over the top, you condemn them. And this is going to become a big issue, I believe, in the next couple of weeks, particularly if Israeli forces do enter Gaza on the ground.
Because it must be hard to deal with that. But, of course, there are Palestinian lives as well that are being destroyed with regard to Gaza.
Yes, every life is important, and we do our best to minimise civilian casualties. But Israel has an objective of eliminating Hamas. And if they're going to achieve that objective, tragically, there will be some collateral damage. They will seek to minimise it, I have no doubt. But there will be collateral damage if they're going to achieve their objective. And they also, of course, want to do their best to free the hostages.
What are your thoughts on the protesters and the fact that they were chanting from the river to the sea and also calling for jihad?
Well, I think it's absolutely appalling, and I would like to see some prosecutions happen for hate speech, which there were plenty of examples yesterday. Some are well recorded, others less well recorded, but the government needs to get a grip on this sort of... I mean, frankly, there was a major campaign to stop the march altogether, which the Jewish Chronicle launched, and it's a great shame that didn't succeed. I think that in the coming days and weeks, pressure needs to be put to bear on the government to stop these types of marches which do nothing but generate hatred for Jewish people.
But what would you say to the argument that there's freedom of speech and in this country we don't sort of police speech in that
It's a fine line between freedom of speech and hate speech. And some of the hate speech is just absolutely disgusting and appalling that was coming out of that march.
And for your members, do they talk with regard to, of course, what's happening to those people in Gaza who are obviously having to deal with this situation?
Everybody is concerned about civilian lives and civilian casualties, whoever they are. But there is a job to be done, and that job is to eliminate Hamas completely and utterly, and also make sure that a son of Hamas doesn't emerge after Hamas has been eliminated.
But don't you think that, obviously, you know, with the violence sort of perpetuates violence, so... Absolutely, Israel have the right to defend itself at every level.
The best comparison is the way the Allied forces dealt with Nazi Germany in 1945. Nazi Germany was an evil which had to be obliterated from the world. And Stalin, Roosevelt and Churchill all agreed on that, and that's what they did. Nazi Germany finished in May 1945 and has never resurfaced. Yes, the idea of Nazism, tragically, still exists, very much so. And I'm sure the idea of Islamic fundamentalism will continue to exist. But we can actually deal with the entity known as Hamas on the ground in Gaza, and that has to be done.
OK. Well, listen, Gary, thank you for speaking so passionately about that, and thank you so much for coming in and talking to me about that.
Thank you very much for having me.
That is Gary Monti. He's the chairman for the National Jewish Assembly. Travelling over now to America, where we're going to speak to the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudridge, and let's find out what's been going on there. Starting off with Trump, and Trump's attorney, Sidney Powell, flips on him. What is this? Has somebody turned on Trump?
Yes, in short, in the Georgia election case where Trump is accused of trying to overturn a legitimate election, fingers crossed there when I say that, one of his co-conspirators, I think they're now described as, Sidney Powell, has taken a plea deal and pled guilty to 6 misdemeanors connected with overturning an election, and has agreed to testify in this matter. And that largely means testifying against Trump and all the other co-conspirators as listed. She has been sentenced to 6 years probation, a $6,000 fine, and must write a letter of apology to Georgia and its residents.
God. So what are they expecting to hear from her then? If she's flipping on him, what kind of nasties could she reveal?
Well, this is the ongoing witch hunt. She will basically say what the state has been saying all along, which is that the election was stolen and Trump sought, whilst he was actually just apparently asking for a recount of the votes. That wasn't what was happening. He was actually mounting an insurrection and trying to overthrow a legitimately elected government. I'm sure is along those lines of the prosecution's angle. But this is in Georgia. It's actually very, very bad. I mean, I seem to make light of it, but it is very, very bad for Trump because these are real world ramifications.
But he's still leading in the polls. He's still leading in the polls, isn't he?
The polls this week have gone through the roof for him. He's now leading. I want to get this right because I'm not. These aren't just sort of the Trump organization polls. CNBC, Bloomberg has him leading in swing states, but for the very first time, he's leading in the under 30s category. Now, everybody. Yeah, the received wisdom is that, yes, well, he can't, Republicans and Trump can never get the young vote. He's currently leading in the 7 swing states, according to the Bloomberg poll. He's leading in the under 30 category. And that is a first. And this is the first time since summer that he's actually leading Biden. You know, I come on here full of doom and gloom saying I don't think he can win in 24 because of these swing states. He's now leading in them.
What the hell's going on with his hair, though? It looks like he's got ears in his head. And then it's all... Well, I just want to quickly finish on Biden, who bought a beach house for $2.75 million in cash. It's a bit dodgy, isn't it? In cash.
In cash.
Cash.
No, perfectly normal. On a senator at the time, I think he was he was back to being a senator. No, absolutely normal. Anybody can afford $2.75 million in cash, and it came just after a text from the son Hunter pressuring his Chinese contact to come up with the $10 million. So there is just a coincidence that pressure was put on a business contact for the $10 million. And a week later, $2.75 million was paid in cash for a beach house on a senator's salary. It's just nothing to see here.
Nothing to see here, Paul Dudridge. Thank you so much. That's Paul Dudridge. He's the host of the Politics People podcast. This is GB News. More to come in the next hour. Good afternoon, it's 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. For the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. On the way, my mystery guest. He is a reality TV star turned professional boxer, and he'll be talking to us about his thoughts on current affairs. He was also in that fabulous show, Married at First Sight Australia. Then, for the Great British Debate, no, UK one though, I'm asking, Suella Braverman says that migrant crossings are an invasion, but do you agree with her? Do you agree with that choice of words? But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Lisa.
It's 5 o'clock. I'm Lisa Hartle in the GB Newsroom. Gaza has been hit by a fresh wave of airstrikes. A number of explosions have been seen after Israel issued a warning to residents to leave the area. Leaflets were dropped in the north of the Strip saying if they stayed, their life was in danger and they may be identified as terrorist sympathisers. Earlier, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told troops the war against Hamas is do or die for his country. Israel Defence Forces spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner says it's a complex mission.
We know how extensive their tunnel mechanisms is and how they are operating and using them. So we're confident we have good intelligence, but the realm of warfare is it's not the known knowns, it's the unknown knowns. And so we know that we have a brutal enemy. We don't know exactly what they're doing. We have a good grasp of their operational capabilities, and we need to confront that and remove that as if it was a tumour.
Former head of the Palestinian diplomatic mission to the UK, Manuel Hassassian, says he still believes in a two-state solution.
Don't try to put us, all in a frame that we are terrorists as Palestinians. There is a difference between the Palestinian people who want peace and security, and there is a difference between the Palestinian Authority, which is the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, who believe in a two-state solution, who have condemned violence all along. The question is, can Israel stop state terrorism on equal basis? That's a question.
Witnesses also say they heard a blast and the sound of ambulances near the Rafah crossing. It happened after a second convoy of aid was allowed to enter Gaza. Yesterday, 20 trucks delivered supplies to the Strip after the border with Egypt was opened for the first time in 2 weeks. The Israeli military has also admitted one of its tanks accidentally hit an Egyptian position near the crossing. It's apologised for the incident, which is now being investigated. In London, an Israel solidarity rally is taking place in Trafalgar Square. The Bring Them Home protest is calling for the release of all hostages being held by Hamas. Relatives and friends are holding posters of those who are missing or believed to have been kidnapped. It comes after days of pro-Palestinian protests, along with claims some people have been inciting violence. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick says the accusations are being taken seriously.
I've written to all chief constables across the country saying that they should refer individuals that come to their attention to the Home Office. There is a legal process to be followed, but as and when we receive those, we will consider them, and if they meet the legal bar, then we will absolutely revoke and expel them, and the first case is already under consideration.
A search and rescue operation is underway off the Kent coast following reports a man on a passenger ship fell overboard. German cruise company Ada says it has reason to believe it was a crew member of the Ada Perla. who's missing from the vessel. The alarm was raised just before 9 o'clock this morning, and the ship returned to the site where it's thought the incident happened. Lifeboats, supported by a helicopter, are also searching the area near Ramsgate. 2 new danger to life weather warnings have been issued in England in the wake of Storm Babette. Severe flood warnings are in place around the River Idle near Retford in Nottinghamshire, which is expected to reach record levels. The number of people who've died during the storm has risen to 4 after police found the body of a woman in her 80s in Chesterfield. Manchester United has opened a book of condolence at Old Trafford following the death of Sir Bobby Charlton. The legendary footballer was a key member of England's World Cup winning team in 1966. Floral tributes and football shirts are being placed outside the Manchester United stadium, with his former club saying he'll always be remembered as a giant of the game. Fans have also been sharing their fondest memories of Sir Bobby.
I saw him play maybe 20 times in the early 70s before he retired. The greatest player in the world, really. I mean, he's up there with Pele.
Very sad to see such a great man and a great footballer pass.
Just shocked, really. You know, he's been part of my life. Get a bit choked. While I've been growing up, you know, I've been following United and all the great things. It's always involved Bobby Charlton.
This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Nana.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 6 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. Still to come each Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP or someone who's had an extremely interesting career, to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. And today I'm joined by a media personality who rose to fame on Married at First Sight and, of course, Celebrity Big Brother. He's a professional boxer and has amassed a huge number of fans on social media. You won't want to miss that. He's on the way next. But for the great bit of debate this hour, I'm asking Suella Braverman says that migrant crossings are an invasion. Do you agree with her wording? I've got a poll up right now asking that question, and a poll has found that over half of Brits agreed with the Home Secretary describing the small boats crisis as an invasion. In addition, a survey found that 52% considered channel migrants to be a security threat, whilst only 20% thought that they weren't a threat at all. But what do you think? And then up later, my mini debate, Labour are reportedly planning to give drivers cash incentives to buy electric cars to keep to the original 2030 target. But what do you think? This all comes after Sunak recently rode back on his net zero policies. But what do you think? Petrol, diesel cars 2030? Do you back Labour? As always, email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. Now then, my mystery guest, have you worked it out? He's a millionaire. Yes. Unfortunately, though, I don't think he's single. A millionaire property tycoon. He first rose to fame when in 2017, I say this because he married a woman he'd never met before on the reality show Married at First Sight. Don't you just love that? He then made an appearance on Celebrity Big Brother and then has dedicated a career into becoming a professional boxer. Now he's here to explain the importance of having father figures in families and talk about his own experience as a first-time dad. Have you guessed it? Well, I'm not sure you have, but I'm joined now by media personality and actor. Yes, here he is. You are?
Benjamin Jardine.
Benjamin Jardine, he's here. Right, so Benjamin Jardine, talk to me. You're a property tycoon. How did you become one? When did you buy your first property?
Oh, it's very interesting. Years ago. Oh, might be showing me age a little bit here.
You don't look that old. You're not over 50.
No, I'm not. No, sorry. I probably bought my first property when I was I'll probably say when I was 23 years old.
23,
About 21, actually, 21 years old.
It could only have been a couple of years ago.
Yeah, well, yeah, only the other year, yeah.
So you bought your first property. How did that...
When interest rates were down.
Oh, remember those days when I was young, you could literally just say, oh, yeah, no, I earn this much, and they'd say, OK, fine, and you could literally get a property.
It's very, very true, yeah. Well, do you know what? It goes in circles, doesn't it? It's a vicious circle, I always like to say. And interest rates are going up now, so obviously... Like what you were saying earlier, and the chaps touched upon, with landlords and everything, it's very, very, testing times for landlords at the time.
Absolutely. Do you still have lots of property?
I'm going more into the development side now as well, so we've got a few developments in the background, but it's, again, you've got to get the right funding, you're looking at the... You know, again, like you're lowering taxes as well, but we're looking at GDP performances on that. 40% taxes on that.
I know, it's astonishing, isn't it? So you still have some properties. What are your thoughts then on this sort of renters reform bill that may be passed in a couple of months' time or so?
I think I agree with what Ben and Stephen said, really. I think it's quite... it's scary. That's what I want to say, because at the end of the day, you're giving all the power, you know, and...
To the tenants, which, you know, there are many tenants, but...
Again, we've all got experiences, haven't we? Yeah. We've all had bad tenants, I suppose, and people that don't look after people's property, I suppose, and you're giving that power away. So what do you do? What do you do? And that's where you need that support from the government. And, you know, to even try and get people out of the houses that could not pay the rent and everything. Yeah. Remember, you're left with these big... interest rates on your mortgages and everything, and it's quite scary and quite worrying.
It is a very worrying time. So talk to me about how you got on to Married at First Sight.
I was walking down the street, Nana.
No, you were.
I was.
Really?
I went out for a sandwich and ended up with a wife. That's a true story.
What happened? How did they approach you?
Literally, I was walking around the street. Basically, they said, "Would you marry a stranger?" I'd been in a long-term relationship that ended, and by the, you know, I was in that emotional mood, like as a Pisces as I am. Well, I was with a stranger for a long time, so yeah.
Well,
you know, in a relationship, I just think it's quite interesting relationships. That, you know, the first 2 years are always your romantic periods, and then the face drops off sometimes.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
The mask slips, and then you see.
You learn. My nan always said, you don't know them unless you live with them.
Well, or the rose-tinted spectacles come off, and then you can see the reality of the situation before you. But I'm not bitter. So what
am I?
Exactly. So what happened then? So what was it like being on that show? Because I find I watch one, even though I know I can go to bed and watch it the next day, I have to just keep going and watching them all on catch-up. I can't help it.
Do you know what? It's I learned a lot about myself as an individual. Again, it is true. You actually do all the scientific tests. So you get your hair cut. I was walking down the street. Next minute, I was in the hairdressers.
So they cut your hair, yeah.
They took my DNA samples.
Really?
Did my IQ test.
Yeah.
Obviously, and then you do all these tests, psychological tests, all these evaluations. So you're actually learning a lot about yourself, but they try and match you by science. That's what I found quite interesting about the whole situation.
So when you turned round and saw your partner, your new wife, what did you honestly think? Honestly?
Do you know what? I was blown away, and all I say is, like, you know, the wedding, it was a great night.
Yeah, but...
It was a great day, great event. I was like, "You're right, Mum."
Yeah, and then what happened? When did the wheels start falling off, as they always do?
In the morning.
No, seriously.
Yeah, in the morning. No, it's again. I think when you watch the show, I think I was I like to say a bit of a rabbit in the headlights. It was. You know, and I'm a big, you know, ambassador for, like, you know, family and everything. You know, I don't know how to say it.
Come on, just say it. Spit it out.
I was scared. Like, do you know what I mean? It was one of them where you think, what have I done? Do you know what I mean? Like, you're in that moment. You think, OK, what do we do now? OK, we've got to go and live together. We've got to go and do this together. We've got to go... And again, when you're... It was, you know, you're learning about yourself, but then you're learning about that person. It's like, you know, I probably, like, why aren't you back at this time? Why aren't you, you know, it's like, well, I didn't know how to... You know, I went training one night. And then the next minute I just thought, OK, where are you? oh, I'm just coming back from training. Do you know what I mean? It's like you're getting checked in on, but it's...
But that's kind of... I mean, like,
it's a relationship.
In relationships, you do sort of tell your partner where you're going and stuff like that, because that's...
But again, when you're single, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, now you've got... Because marriage, you have to work at a marriage.
So how long did you last on the series? Because I didn't get to see your one. I'm going to go back and watch it, though.
Yes, I lasted... all the way to the end.
Did you?
Yeah, it was... and do you know what? Again, it's like what I say before. I'm very, very serious about it, and I was serious about going into it, but then all of a sudden you learn about yourself. And again, what I always like to say is someone wasted a lot of years of my life with the wrong person, so why would I want to do that to someone else? And that's what I try to put, you know, across at the end.
And were they upset that you didn't want to be with them?
Yes, yeah. But again, it was... because you go through couples counselling, you go through all that, and that's where you learn a lot about yourself. So,
at what point in your mind through that series did you go, there's no way I could be with this person? You know, like sometimes you're with someone and they do this one thing that just irritates you and you just think, no.
In the honeymoon, I'd say the honeymoon.
Oh, that early?
No, it's... Yeah. What have I done? Do you know what I mean?
God, that's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you went through the whole thing, because obviously you get to taken to nice places, you get lots of good food.
Yeah. But again, you are, you know, you're trying to learn about that person, and it's hard when you've got a camera in your face as well. Do you know what I mean? To learn about that person, and then you know, you're recording it off scenes, you know, and everyone's evaluating you. There's a lot of pressure.
Are you still friends?
No. But like, do you know what I mean? It's like, but I wish. You know, anyone who does a show, if they do it for the right reasons, respect to them.
Did anybody get together on the show that you did? Is anybody still together?
No. Like, but again, it was different because when I did it, you actually did get married. Like now, you don't get married.
Do they? They'd have a ceremony, but it's not the actual thing.
But well, at the end of it, if you get to the end, they go, right, do you want to get married? When I did it, it was like, right, you're married. Oh, OK. And you're married legally for a year.
With the Australian one, if you've ever watched that, that's great. But then I think the British one has caught up now. If you watch
yes, it's a little bit feisty, isn't it? But again, it is feisty.
It's great.
And it's true, you know, again, you're strangers, but you're in a relationship, but that 2-year phase or whatever, when you're learning that your partner, just comes out straight away.
Yeah. Well, what has it been like for you now out of it? Because you have a child now and
yeah,
father.
I've got a little girl. And I've recently had a little boy.
A little boy.
Jude and Sienna, like, amazing. I'm in an amazing place. To be honest, when I came out of Big Brother, I had to fight for my little girl. And I had to go through the court systems and the process. And I'm a big ambassador for, like, Family Needs Fathers. And it's very, very close to my heart.
So would your partner not let you see the child? Or, I mean, as much as you can say.
Yeah, it was and I want to be, like, right, it's just as... It's fair, and like there's a lot of things with mental health at the minute, but being in someone's life, your flesh and blood, like that's what you want to be. That's what life's about in my eyes, and I'm a big family person, and when that's taken away from you, that can affect you. But you know, you want to know where to, and that's why I'm an ambassador of Family Fathers, because you have to reach out. But I had to go and learn the law. I had to go. You know, I felt like Richard Gere. Do you know what I mean? At the end of it, yeah, because. You know, when you're fighting for something that is emotional to you, again, like a relationship, you don't act. You're not cold and calculated like how, you know, like as a businessman, say for instance.
I am in relationships. That's why I'm
single. Now with Nana, I like that. But yeah, but again, I think we are getting a little bit more like that. So you know, I went through like 4 years of fighting, but we won.
What is the one thing that you learned from that process? So maybe a law that you learned that, or something that you think that a lot of fathers don't know, that you learned and you thought, oh, wow, that changes things. Was there something that you learned in that process?
Absolutely, yeah.
One thing, though, that if someone's watching now and they're going through a custody-type battle, or their dad is estranged from their kids, that they would want to know that could really help them?
You're not on your own. You're not on your own. There's a lot of people out there, and, like, I want to be in my daughter's and my son's life forever, and I want them to know that, well, it's in writing's forever. Writing's forever, and she's always going to know that I've fought for her. And you're not on your own, but it's the legal system, which is very, very hard. I had to go... I had to go...
Tell me a little bit about what
you know, what you had to... Because, you know, like, again, one thing, make sure you get parental responsibility.
What side is that, on the birth certificate?
Yeah, I didn't know that
beginning?
time. I didn't know, and I don't want to go too much into it, but I had to go to, like, to start that relationship. I got about a year taken away from my daughter's life, and I had to go and have people supervise me whilst I was doing it, and going through that motion. And one thing I have learned through the whole process is child matters. It's not about the mother, it's not about the father.
That's
about
what I was going to
child.
say, of course, because my kids, you know, I'm not with the dads of my children, but I make sure 100% that those people are in their lives, because they won't thank me for denying.
That's an amazing woman.
I mean, they have to have.
Yeah,
the dad is important.
But I grew up. My mum and dad are childhood sweethearts. All I've ever wanted in life, I look at my mum and dad, and I'm just like, I want that. And, like, you know, like, my dad turned 70 the other day, and they've been together since they were, like, 15 years old. And I'm sure they've had their ups and downs, but they've worked. But that's all I've ever seen in my life. My little girl, I get 50% of it, and then I've got my little boy. And that is everything. So I've always looked at my mum and dad, and that's my experiences. So I always try and never, ever belittle no one or anything like that. Like you said, and that's what it's all about, Nana, what have you learned? Child comes first.
Absolutely.
Not about me, not about if I've had a bad day. You always make time. And this is, through this experience is what has happened.
Well, you're in a good place now.
She comes boxing with me and everything.
Oh, lovely. So you've got boxing, you're in a good place. You've got a partner now and everything.
Yeah, I'm really, really happy. And let's be totally honest, like, you know, that's the person that should have walked down the aisle.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's really
so
weird.
You're not married yet.
That scares me.
But you've just heard it from him first, that he should have walked you down the aisle, and he will do soon. There you go. Well, listen, if people want to find out more about what you're doing, are you doing anything in the public
Yeah, we've
eye?
just come back from Germany. We've just had a professional fight in Germany. I'm fighting again in November. We've got lots of other things in the pipeline, which I'm not allowed to talk about at the minute. But it's you know, through everything, for all these opportunities, it's been amazing. And obviously, we're looking for a title next year. And Jake Paul, here I come, son.
Benjamin, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Nana.
That is
really, really good.
Benjamin Jardine, yes.
Yes.
Right, well, listen, if you just tuned in, welcome on board. It's just gone 21 minutes after 5 o'clock, but still to come. Labour are reportedly planning to give drivers cash to buy electric cars in order to keep the original 2030 ban of the new sale of new petrol and diesel cars. And this all comes as Rishi Sunak recently rode back on his initial net zero policy. So would you be on board with Starmer's plan to ban petrol and diesel cars by 2030? Do you want a lecky car? Well, I'll get all of your views. Keep them coming. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
News channel.
Welcome aboard. If you've just tuned in, this is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Don't forget as well, you can stream the show live on YouTube. I'm Nana Akua, and it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, Suella Braverman says that migrant crossings are an invasion, but do you agree with her wording? More than half of Britons back the Home Secretary's choice of words used to describe the arrival of 109,000 illegal migrants via small boats since 2018. That is according to a poll of nearly 2,000 people. In addition, the survey by People Polling found that an overwhelming 52% of the public believe that channel migrants should be considered a security threat, whereas only 20% did not believe they represented a threat at all. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, Suella Braverman says that migrant crossings are an invasion. Do you agree with her? Now, I'm joined by Nigel Nelson, GB News senior political commentator, and also Stephen Wolfe, director for the Centre of Migration and Economic Policy. OK, I'm going to start with you, Nigel. Nigel?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Well, do you agree with that?
Oh, sorry, I thought I was going to get a question.
Well, that is the question.
No question there, Nana.
I've done the question. I was just saying Nigel.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think that the language that Suella Braverman's been using is unnecessarily inflammatory. When she talks about invasions, that gives the idea of some kind of military attack, which it's not. When she talks about hurricanes, she suggests that it's all coming our way, which, again, it's not. If there's any hurricane in migration, it's going around the world. So the language is really bad. Even illegal migrants is the wrong language. That the official term is unregulated migrants, and that's the term the Home Office uses. This is just one for politicians.
Well, but she's... I mean, look, I don't think there's anything wrong with the word invasion. Let's see, an invasion instance, invading a country, region with an armed force. Yes, that is true. But there are lots of definitions of the word invasion that don't necessarily involve a military precision. Stephen, what do you think?
Well, I look across history when you're looking at the impact of immigration to the United Kingdom. When the Romans came here, they invaded us with an army of around 20,000 people. When the Normans invaded England, they came with between 5,000 and 7,000. When the Germans planned to invade the United Kingdom, they looked at around 100,000. So the context there in terms of military is large numbers of people trying to come into the United Kingdom because they wanted to take us over. So in that context, I can't agree with Suella Braverman in suggesting that these people want to take us over. But if you're looking at the numbers, then clearly, when we're looking at over 1 million people since 2000 have claimed asylum in this country, we've had 190,000 in the last few years. These are huge numbers coming over. And your correspondent is wrong to say that the government uses the phrase unregulated. It's irregular migration. Illegal migration is actually the legal definition when somebody comes into the United Kingdom when they don't allow or have a reason to come here legally. That is As an immigration barrister, I know that. It's only when they claim asylum do they start to become legal. And so we have to look at those definitions very clearly. I think she needs to really be careful about the language, because what it does, it simply hands over to the left and those who disagree with her a weapon to say she's racist and this is damaging. Choose your words wisely if you want to deal with the issue properly.
Yeah, but Stephen, this is a legal definition of invading. It says trespass, encroach, infringe, invade mean to make inroads upon the property, territory or rights of another. Trespass implies an unwarranted or unlawful intrusion. What's wrong with her using that word? I'm just not sure why she should be, you know.
Well, I'm saying it's understandable if you want to look at it in terms of ordinary citizens understanding that language. I get it. But the point is, she's a politician who tries to kind of define where we want to be in this debate. And the debate is very clear. Most people want to see irregular and unlawful migration dealt with swiftly. They want to see asylum applicants only for those who are genuine asylum seekers. And what they need is a Home Secretary and a government that is willing to deal with it. All she does when using language that can be used as inflammatory by those on the left is she hands them a weapon, rather than simply saying, let's deal with it properly. And I believe if she does it that way, then she'll have more people on her side and less attacks from the left.
But don't you think that they're actually waiting for something? I mean, look, Nigel, whatever she says, they'll find something because they're just trying to weaponise her words.
Well, I mean, she's weaponising the words, and this is the point, that don't use them as weapons, that if you're trying to sort out a way of stopping the boats, and the one thing that we all agree on is that the boats should be stopped, but then to try and rudge people up to... It encourages hatred, I think. And I don't think it's necessarily racist what she is doing, but I do think that it means that the British public have a kind of response to it, that somehow we've got an influx of people we don't want, and I think that to go on what Stephen was saying, almost like, yes, they're trying to take us over or something like that, none of which is true.
But what about Lampedusa then, that Italian island that ended up with more migrants than the actual population themselves, Nigel? I mean, what would you call that then?
Well, I mean, not an invasion.
You wouldn't,
these were people turning up on the shores. And yes, if you haven't got the infrastructure to deal with it, it becomes an impossible problem. But what Suella Braverman is not doing is trying to solve the issue of the small boats, and the best way to do that would be to change the asylum system so you don't encourage people to cross the channel because they have to claim asylum on British soil.
Well, that's what they think. Nigel Nelson, thank you very much. He's GBNews senior political commentator, and Stephen Wolfe, director for the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Thank you for your thoughts. Well, what do you think at home? Was she wrong to use the word invasion? I'm sorry, but I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I'm sorry to say, but I'm inclined to agree with her. It's coming up to 32 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, we'll continue with the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, Suella Braverman says migrant crossings are an invasion. Do you agree with her wording? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, former Labour advisor Matthew Laza, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. But first, let's get you latest news headlines with Lisa.
It's 5:32. I'm Lisa Hartle in the GB newsroom. Gaza has been hit by a fresh wave of airstrikes. A number of explosions have been seen after Israel warned residents to leave the area. Leaflets were dropped in the north of the Strip saying if they stayed, their life was in danger and they may be identified as terrorist sympathisers. Earlier, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told troops the war against Hamas is do or die for his country. Witnesses also say they heard a blast and the sound of ambulances near the Rafah crossing. It happened after a second convoy of aid was allowed to enter Gaza. Yesterday, 20 trucks delivered supplies to the Strip after the border with Egypt was opened for the first time in 2 weeks. In London, an Israel solidarity rally is being held in Trafalgar Square. The Bring Them Home protest is calling for the release of all hostages being held by Hamas. Relatives and friends have been holding posters of those who are missing or believed to have been kidnapped. The Met Police has made an arrest after someone was reported to have driven past the vigil shouting anti-Semitic abuse. 2 new danger to life weather warnings have been issued in England in the wake of Storm Babette. Severe flood warnings are in place around the River Idle near Retford in Nottinghamshire, which is expected to reach record levels. The number of people who've died during the storm has risen to 4 after police found the body of a woman in her 80s in Chesterfield. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website gbnews.com. Now it's back to Nana.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Can you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 38 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio. It's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking Suella Braverman, now she says that migrant crossings are an invasion. But do you agree with her language? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by former Labour advisor Matthew Larser, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Right, Matthew Larser, an invasion?
Look, I can see why people think that. I think it's an unfortunate choice of words from the Home Secretary. I think that we need to try and be measured in the language we have. And I also think that the real reason is that she's majors on language is because she's failed on her principal job, which is to stop the small boats. The Tories haven't stopped the small boats. The numbers are higher than ever, and the backlog gets ever longer of people whose applications need to be processed. So I'd say, Suella, you know, stop trying to make headlines with language and start making headlines by actually sorting the problem.
You think, though, that a lot of these left-leaning people who complained about the word invasion would be speaking about the word jihad and all the other words, but they seem to be quite silent on that.
I think my side of the argument shouldn't get hung up on the language. They shouldn't make the language the biggest issue. You know, they shouldn't sort of distract that. What they should be focusing on, just as Suella should be focusing on sorting the problem, the Labour Party and the left should be focusing on highlighting how she hasn't sorted the problem.
But surely that language is actually making it sound like she's taking it seriously, Danny.
She's not doing anything.
I disagree. I think if you ask the average man and woman on the street, part of the vernacular, if you ask them to define, and I understand there are less violent definitions of invasion, but I think there are connotations that are violent with invasion. You think of a home invasion, that's what the Yanks call burglary. Yeah. So, I'm sorry, Nana and I are locking horns on something. So I think that for the Home Secretary to use those words...
So you agree with Matthew?
I agree.
I think he's to the left of me on this one.
No, I'm not. I just don't see the point of why she used the language. It would be better off if she didn't use the language associated with violence, in my opinion.
So you think... That's why I think it's not a great choice of word. Let me give you the dictionary definition, because obviously, you know, jihad is associated with violence. From the river to the sea, these are associated with violence. Let me read you a definition of invasion. Trespass, this is a legal definition. Trespass, encroach, infringe... Invade mean to make inroads into the property, territory or rights of other. Trespass implies an unwarranted or unlawful intrusion.
You are using the Gary Lineker defence by not actually
I'm just going to duck here for a minute.
I'm just reading you a dictionary definition of invasion and saying that I agree that her wording was fine, because on that definition there, that is all the things that somebody who comes to your country illegally is doing.
If we pursue your logic, we are going to have to...
That's not my logic, that's just my definition, so I'm agreeing that what she said...
If we pursue that, we are now going to have to go onto Google and get a dictionary definition of every word she utters.
Why? Sorry,
because you're doing it with the word invasion. There may be different connotations with other words.
I'm just simply agreeing with her, and having read the definition, I agree with her even more. And I really don't see what the big deal is, where people seem to be so focused on the language for a word that is actually that has a meaning as to what she says, when actually the issue is the migrant crossing.
I think the thing is about being... I think
she's right about it.
I think the thing is that people think you invaded. That is the dictionary definition as you've read out. I think it is most often used as a about armies, isn't it? About being invaded by foreign power, and I think that's the connotations that people find difficult.
People are coming from a foreign place, though, aren't
the biggest thing to do is sort the problem out. So, you know, I'm less bothered about the language, and I'm more bothered about the fact there's 150,000 migrants cases who are stacking up. There are hotels across the country which is costing us it's £6, £7, £8 million a day. The figure seems to keep going up on an almost daily basis, and we've had 100,000 people come in small boats.
I think the members of the public...
Let's sort the problem.
No, I think the members of the public would actually agree. I reckon that most people would say that it does feel like the place has been invaded. I think she's...
OK, so does it feel like... I tell you what...
I don't think she's wrong in saying
there
that.
Are areas,
she's making a good point.
There are areas of Liverpool... I'm a Scouser. I've travelled 96 miles from the Midlands, but I'm a Scouser.
And 96 miles back.
Hopefully I'll make it back. There are areas of Liverpool that are unrecognisable due to recent mass immigration, completely unrecognisable, where there have been people who have moved out. OK, now they've been replaced by people who necessarily have different belief systems, different religions, and that there are conflicts already. And we need to understand. Now, if I was to ask a Scouser in Kensington, the suburb of Liverpool, do you feel like you've been invaded? He or she would probably say yes. Now, the fact that I haven't got any personal experience with this quote-unquote invasion led me to my response earlier on. So you go to Liverpool, you go to areas of Coventry, Birmingham, where streets are unrecognisable as to what they were like 5 or 6 years ago, and you ask the average Brummie, do you feel like it's an invasion? And he and she would look around and they would just point you to the demographic and say, yeah, it feels like an invasion.
So my point is that it's not. It doesn't mean that you're being rude about the people who are coming from another place. You are just being honest about what you see. And for those people who live on the Kent coast, having boats constantly coming in, that would feel like an invasion. So I just think that she's right. She's using the language that the people who are dealing with it are actually facing. That's what she's talking about.
But she's not dealing with the problem. That's the issue.
Well, I'm not going to argue with that.
Yeah,
you know.
that's what worries me most.
No, we're not. We're talking about, is she right to use the word invasion? I think we can all agree that things need to be changed. I still can't remove myself from the violent connotation with the word invasion. OK, so I take you to the streets of Liverpool. Do you feel like it's an invasion? They would say yes. Are there any incidents of violence? And then maybe we're getting semantics and we're disagreeing with vernacular and the definitions again. We go back to...
But I put it to you, though, that, you know, if you are around those areas where this influx is happening, that's what it'll feel like to you. Yeah. So she is using the language that those people who are there can identify. It's all very well for Gary Lineker living in his, you know, wherever it is, in his ivory tower, talking about it. This is an invasion because he has no experience of it. But if you were in that area having to deal with that problem, you would feel that way.
She should have qualified it then. She should have said no, she didn't. She should have said there are areas of Liverpool, there are areas of Birmingham.
About the South Coast, you did.
I think you're right, Nana, in the sense that if you are on the South Coast, it does, and which obviously is Britain's first line of defence in the Second World War, is into the national psyche as the kind of barrier between us and historically our enemies. Then, and you have people coming over, and you wait, as Nigel Farage has done on his pictures, you have people just randomly wandering around beaches. I see it can feel like that. I think though she should tone the language down unless she's going to come up with some better solutions.
Well, I think she should call it as she sees it, especially for those who have to deal with it. And I think it's typical of champagne socialists to come and sort of water down her language when they don't have to deal with the situation at all. That's what I think. But this shows nothing without you and your views. I'm
not sure Danny's ever been a champagne socialist before. It's a first.
That's a real compliment. I'll take that back. Let's see what our great British voices think. It's their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. I've got two of you. I've got Julie in Middlesbrough and I've got Alan in Grimsby. Right, I'm going to start with you, Julie in Middlesbrough. What do you think, Julia?
It's Julia.
Yeah, I did. I corrected myself second time, Julia.
I've got three reasons why I agree with her. The first reason is, if it was mainly women and children coming across the channel and coming in illegally, there's no way in a million years anyone would see that as an invasion, because it's women and children. What we've got instead, though, is working age, fighting age men. Also, it's the sheer speed at which this is happening. I live in a very multicultural area, and I am exactly in agreement with you when you say it to me, personally, it does feel like an invasion. My whole life's changed. Where I grew up and where I live is totally different to what it was when I was younger. And instead of mixing with the cultures, we're living parallel alongside each other because of the sheer speed at which this has all happened. And also, when you look at the likes of Sweden, I worry that that might happen here and we'll end up with civil unrest on the streets because of it, because of the speed, because they're all men, and because we haven't undergone significant changes for us to all integrate properly. That's what I think. So, yes, I do agree with that.
Wow, if she'd said it like you, Julia, there wouldn't have been a problem at all.
I think you should be Home Secretary.
You should be Home Secretary. Crikey, that was good.
Absolutely.
Alan McNeely in Grimsby, what's he got to say? It's a tough act to follow, Al. Good luck.
It is. Good afternoon, Nana. I think the Home Secretary is absolutely spot on. It's what the average person thinks and sees. If you have hundreds of young men turning up on your beaches day after day after day, what else would you call it but an invasion? And it is. These people are coming here uninvited. They're entering the country illegally. Whether they should be here or not is then got to be determined. But it can be seen as nothing else than an invasion. And those people, and I'm afraid all your guests on today who are all saying, oh, this is terribly shocking language. The Home Secretary is telling it like it is. And she's telling it in the way that people see it. So they can play with the semantics, but the reality is that every day we have hundreds of these people showing up on the coast, being spread throughout the country. And the lady that's on with me is absolutely right. The impact on the societies in which people live is absolutely dramatic. You wouldn't recognise some of the places that, in the country now have changed dramatically in the last probably 15 years.
Well,
it's been constant.
Well, that's the problem. If it's not managed properly or done well, then it creates upset and anger, and it creates tension. That's why she's calling it out, and I agree with you guys. Thank you very much, Alan McLeary and Julia. There you go. Take care. Those are my great British voices. Fabulous. Well, listen, moving on to another story that caught my eye today. The Labour Party is reportedly planning to give drivers cash incentives to buy electric cars. They literally can't sell them. They've got to give them away. That's right, to keep the original 2030 ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel cars going. Now, this comes after Sunak recently rolled back on his net zero policies and got a little bit of a bounce. So what do you think? Are you on board with his plan? I'm going to start with you, Danny Kelly.
I read here 1,500 quid incentive. Listen, if you're going to need a £1,500 loan in order to buy a 30 grand car, you're not in the market to buy a 30 grand car. You're £28,500 short. He's giving you 1,500, Nicker. You can't afford it with that 1,500. It's true. Because you can't afford it, you won't have somewhere to park.
The problem's been with the ULEZ grants as well in London for the grants for things that meet cars that they had to put them up.
No, listen, the best thing that Rishi Sunak has done all year is aligning ourselves with the 2035 petrol ban in Europe in 2035, Now, Keir Starmer wants to bring it back to 2030. Look, as you know, I have an interest in used cars. That's my business, and it's just universally unpopular.
Yeah, but quickly to you, Matthew Larson, then we'll go to your supplement.
I think the issue is that electric cars are coming. We can't hold back the tide. It's a global thing. I think, as Danny said, the difference in 2030 and 2035, when the rest of Europe, and remember, all cars are made for Europe. They're made on a European-wide level. Even if we make them and sell them to Europe, or Europe makes them and sells them to us. So I wouldn't die in a ditch for 2030, but electric cars are coming.
Well, I think they need to pile on the pylons, and don't they?
Have you got one?
I will not buy one.
I just said
I'm not going to do that. I'm not doing it. No, nice try. It didn't work. Right. Well, listen, it's time now for Supplement Sunday. This is a part of the show where my panel and I discuss some of the news stories that caught their eye. I'm going to start with you again, Danny. Harry and Meghan, is it?
Well, look, Harry and Meghan, they're banging on about the climate, and here they are in a private jet, jetting around the world, when the alternative to this, of course, is are they going to get on a fly, what are they called? British Airways? I don't know. EasyJet, yeah. So they
I was on Ryanair this week. I didn't see them in the
Harry and Meghan
speedy boarding
used a Dassault Falcon 7X to fly from New Jersey to Canouan after attending a summit in New York. Look, it just does them no favours.
It's a billionaire's island as well. Nobody can get on there.
It does their message no favours. The optics are terrible. Trying to stop, the world boiling itself to death, and here they are on a Dassault Falcon 7X.
Well, they talk about offsetting their carbon. We all know that's nonsense. What about you, Matthew?
So on a sort of slightly lighter note, but also tragic note, the Britain students and anybody who's ever been sick are in mourning this week because the BBC's announced, go to BBC again, it's going to get rid of doctors. The daytime soap filmed in your backyard in Birmingham. And so the key thing is it's promised it's going to spend the money in Birmingham that it saves by axing doctors.
Really?
But, anybody's ever been off sick, what are we going to watch now? First Neighbours, now doctors.
I think I'll catch up on my Married at First Sight series.
It's always a good thing.
Apparently the British one's no good this year. Danielle only watches the Australian one.
No, the British one's very good. Yes.
Do you like the Australian one? I'm half Aussie.
The Australian one is fantastic.
Yeah.
The British one started off very, very badly. It was very cheap. They didn't have anybody with surgery. But in Australia, they've all got their lips and their eyes and teeth done. Really? And now the British ones are doing... Oh, honestly, I shouldn't say that, but it is fantastic. I do love it. Well, let's have a look at my supplement. Now, this one is about Sadiq Khan. He's actually been accused of racially charged a smear campaign against his Conservative opponent, who's Suzanne Hall, with a dedicated attack website claiming that she is prejudiced against black Londoners. Wow. Now, Labour Party have targeted Londoners with Facebook and Instagram adverts that describe Susan Hall as extreme, and the adverts also claim that the Tories have attempted to rig the voting system.
Now, they have changed the voting system. Rig is a motive word. Look, I don't think it's a great tactic to divide people, and actually, do you remember when Sadiq was first elected, Zach Goldsmith was his opponent, and he did a whole thing which was to try and pitch Muslim and Hindu voters against each other. Terrible. And that didn't work. It was bad when the Tories did it, Labour should be careful of not doing the same.
But that's really bad to try and pitch her against black Londoners. She's a lovely woman.
All she's done, all she's guilty of, is at a public meeting at City Hall, she said problems with crime within the black community is something that I have brought up constantly. The problem is the minute we do, we are accused of being racist. That's all the woman has said.
She's right, and that's exactly what they've done. They're accused her of being racist. And in fact, she said Carnival was dangerous, which I wholeheartedly agree. I wrote a piece in the Daily Mail about it because it is dangerous. The last time I went, I almost got branded on a vat of jerk chicken. Don't laugh. It was a hot steel drum.
He's laughing.
He laughed. That was an instant laugh.
That would be heaven
That's
for
an
me.
instant ban.
No, drowning in hot chickens. What was it?
No,
jerk chicken.
No, I almost got stuck on the steel drum out on the outside. I didn't even get in.
I mean, there's quite a selection of what some people might say are cliches in that sentence.
It wasn't great. It wasn't great. It was pretty scary.
We're not doing a special from Carnival next year.
I'm not going there ever again. I thought it was too scary. But listen, on today's show, I've been asking you, have the BBC prejudiced? Have there been prejudice in their reporting of the Hamas conflict? And according to our Twitter poll, 82% of you, that is huge, say yes. Wow. Whilst only 13% of you say no. Shocking results, but I agree.
And everybody has to pay the licence fee.
They do, we all do, otherwise you're jailed. Thank you so much to my panel, former laser advisor, Lazy advisor. Matthew Lala.
My secret's out.
Matthew Lala, thank you so much. And also in the hot seat today, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you.
And as ever, a huge thank you to you at home for your company. I'll be back next week, same time, same place. I'll leave you with the weather.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to the forthcoming week, and for most of us, unfortunately, it is staying unsettled. Further spells of wind and rain to come. But for now, this area low pressure, which has been responsible for the very heavy rainfall, has now cleared. But unfortunately, further areas of low pressure are waiting in the Atlantic. But back to this evening, for most of us, it should be a fairly dry and clear night. Perfect recipe for a chilly night, actually, especially for Scotland, Northern England. Could see a widespread frost, and after the very wet weather what we've had, could just see some icy stretches. So just do take care if you are out and about. Could just see a few showers for Northern Ireland, may just creep into parts of Western Cornwall too, but elsewhere, a dry start to the day. Could just see a few mist and fog patches first thing too, but really it's going to set us up for a largely dry picture. Best of the sunshine as we go through the course of the day will be across parts of Scotland and Northern England. Still the risk of some rain just moving into Northern Ireland and the far west of Cornwall at times, and for most of us temperatures very similar to recent days, 10s to 12s in the north, potentially up to 15 to 16 degrees in the south. Looking ahead to Tuesday, a band of rain will spread its way northwards during the course of the day, so fairly wet affair for a good chunk of the UK, potentially staying dry for most of the day in Scotland, but unfortunately middle of the week stays fairly unsettled for all of us.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Lisa Hartle in the GB Newsroom. Gaza has been hit with a fresh wave of airstrikes. A number of explosions have been seen after Israel issued a warning to residents to leave the area. Leaflets were dropped in the north of the Strip saying if they stayed, their life was in danger and they may be identified as terrorist sympathisers. Earlier, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told troops the war against Hamas is do or die for his country. Israel Defense Forces spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner says it's a complex mission.
We know how extensive their tunnel mechanisms is and how they are operating and using them. So we're confident we have good intelligence, but the realm of warfare is it's not the known knowns, it's the unknown knowns. And so we know that we have a brutal enemy. We don't know exactly what they're doing. We have a good grasp of their operational capabilities, and we need to confront that and remove that as if it was a tumour.
Former head of the Palestinian diplomatic mission to the UK, Manuel Hassas-Ian, says he still believes in a two-state solution.
Don't try to put us, all in a frame that we are terrorists as Palestinians. There is a difference between the Palestinian people who want peace and security, and there is a difference between the Palestinian Authority, which is the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, who believe in a two-state solution, who have condemned violence all along. The question is, can Israel stop state terrorism on equal basis? That's a question.
Witnesses also say they heard a blast and the sound of ambulances near the Rafah crossing. It happened after a second convoy of aid was allowed to enter Gaza. Yesterday, 20 trucks delivered supplies to the Strip after the border with Egypt was opened for the first time